Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Facing the threatening power, Smile subconsciously tried to avoid looking at the face shaded by the hood, as if there was a dreadful and evil pit hidden inside. He even thought it was possible that the sorcerer in front of him was a user of black magic. After putting on Ice Revenger, it kept infusing a steady cold flow into Lucian's body, strengthening his willpower. At the same time, Lucian could also sense the tension in the air built by the ring. With Ice Revenger, Lucian could be immune to all the apprentice-level magics working on his mind. The person who wore the ring could, at the same time, have the frightful presence buff forcing people surrounding him or her to feel frightened, which was usually a buff of night. Without asking for permission, Lucian entered the room and closed the door behind him. Under the alert gaze of Smile, Lucian casually found a chair and sat down, then he started talking again in the pretended harsh voice. I knew the apprentice by accident. She made an appointment for me to meet the sorcerer who came from the headquarters of the Continental Congress of Magic. I was looking forward to meeting him to find the land where sorcerers and sorceresses can feel free to study magic. But before the meeting, she died, and I never had the chance to meet the sorcerer. I was planning on asking the young lad named Lucian the same question as well, but Ural was a step ahead of me. Knowing that the sorcerer sitting in front of him was not his enemy, Smile finally relaxed. Rubbing his hands, he started explaining why he was also looking for the mysterious sorcerer. I met her several months ago, and I invited her to our secret apprentice group meeting. Later she told us that she met a great sorcerer from the Congress. In her description, on the land where the Congress sits, all the sorcerers and sorceresses don't have to hide anymore. We were so encouraged. I understand, Lucian nodded. We are sorcerers, not rats. We deserve much better than this. Smile raised his head and started feeling close to this unexpected visitor. Sorcerers and sorceresses always understood their shared struggle and fear. Facing the same enemy, most sorcerers and sorceresses united to help each other and to escape from the search of the church. Yes, sir. You must understand our excitement. Smile lowered his head and looked at his hands again. We also asked her to invite the great sorcerer to come to our meeting. Although he didn't show up for the first time, the sorceress brought a journal called Arcana from him to us. Lucian remembered the journal. It must be the same one the sorceress mentioned in her notebook. Arcana? Lucian pretended he never heard of the journal before. Yes, sir. When she first mentioned the Congress, some of us didn't believe it. After reading it, all of us started yearning for the place. The journal was old, very old. It was published about 25 years ago. But the ideas in the journal were amazing, way beyond imagination. It was like a new world. Smile's face lightened up a bit. A few seconds later, Smile continued in a depressed voice, but she was found by the church before our next meeting. I know it was dangerous, but I still don't want to give up. I moved from Purple Lillian to this pub, hoping I could find any clue related to the Congress. Before, I was afraid that the church might still be watching her place, so I waited for almost a month and finally sent Doro there tonight. Lucian saw Smile's face was changing with different emotions: excitement, astonishment, sadness and depression. He was pretty sure Smile was not lying. Hearing Smile's explanation, Lucian felt kind of disappointed, since he was hoping that Smile might know something more about the Congress. Her death is our loss, Lucian said slowly. I'm afraid the sorcerer you were talking about might get caught with her at the same time. A sorcerer from the headquarters can easily catch the church's attention. I guess so. Smile nodded with a sad look. What a tragedy, yelled the owl Doro. Smile, can I take a look at the journal? Lucian was trying to see if he could find any information from it. Smile shook his head and replied, sorry, sir. The journal is not here now. We take turns to read it. The journal was very hard for us apprentices to understand, but I guess for a real sorcerer like you, it won't be a problem. The power of the ring made Smile think Lucian was at least a sorcerer of the first or second circle, instead of an apprentice like him. Toward Smile's assumption, Lucian neither admitted nor denied, since Smile's respect might bring him some benefits. So if you don't mind, sir, Smile asked Lucian with a bit hesitation, you can join us. The journal will be passed on to another apprentice over the next meeting. Lucian thought about the potential risk, but he also didn't want to miss the chance to find the apprentice group in Alto. What do you usually do during the meeting? Lucian asked. Alto is the last city of ancient Sylvanas magic empire, and there are still many sorcerers and sorceresses teaching their apprentices secretly. Apprentices gather together to exchange information, magic materials and views. We work together and help each other, Smile explained. I see. But the church is watching us all the time. How did the founders manage to start the group at the very beginning? Lucian wanted to ask more questions to make sure it was not a trap. Well, there are several apprentice groups. Most apprentices here belong to one of them, while some join more than one group. The founders of our group first met each other by accident in the Melzer Black Forest when they were seeking the same magic materials. Smile answered in a patient way. I know you're very cautious, sir, and I completely understand. Every one of us all felt the same way when we first joined the meeting group. You'll see that it's a very secret group. Except the one who introduces you to the meeting, you hardly can recognize anyone else there, because we'd all dress like the way you're dressing now. If you can join us, sir, it will be our pleasure. And I'm pretty sure you can also find what you need there. At least we can try, Smile added. Despite the man's harsh voice, Smile felt the man in the black robe was not a vicious sorcerer. Instead, he appeared to be quite calm and understanding. If their apprentice group could have a real sorcerer as a regular member, these apprentices, including Smile himself, could definitely benefit a lot from it. Even if the man was actually not as powerful as he appeared to be, Smile didn't think he would do any harm to the group. Lucien was persuaded. He knew sooner or later he had to find a group instead of always working alone, and the magic potions and reagents were also too tempting for Lucien to refuse. Well, my lab was damaged several days ago. If your group can provide me with a whole set of labware, I'll be more than willing to go. I don't think it will be a problem, sir. Smile grinned. Thank you, Smile. Then where is the group meeting, and when? This Saturday evening, answered Smile. It would be held in the sewers, but we haven't agreed on the specific location. Please tell me how to find you when we decide, sir. Don't hold your meeting in the sewers. Lucien warned Smile seriously. The church is lately keeping a close watching there. Don't ask me what happened there. And don't ask why I know this. Just tell all your group members not to go down there recently. What? Smile was shocked. Even thinking about what would happen to the apprentice group if he hadn't met the mysterious sorcerer tonight made his heart beat really fast. We can develop a set of code first. Then when you decide where and when to hold the meeting, find the 8th house opposite to the ruin of the apprentice's place and leave the secret code on the corner of the wall. It's easier and also safer for both of us, said Lucien. The house sat right beside Auntie Elise's place. It was very convenient for Lucien to see the code on his way. After agreeing on the secret code, Lucien stood up from the chair and was about to leave. Cymbeline stopped him and asked, Sir, can you give me your pseudonym? We don't use real names during the meeting. Lucien thought for a few seconds and replied, Well, call me Professor. Lucien slightly dusted his black robe and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned towards Smile. I almost forgot. I'm working on an experiment recently which requires corpse mushroom and revenant dust. I'm running out of these two materials. If you guys can provide some, I'd really appreciate it. Then he opened the door and stepped out of the room. Good night, Owl. Lucien nodded politely. Owl was Smile's pseudonym. Smile watched the mysterious sorcerer closing the door gently and heard his light footsteps downstairs. Like a dream, the room became quiet again, as if the man never been there. Chapter 42, The Secret Meeting. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. After leaving the room, while Lucien was walking downstairs, he dispelled the spirit mark he left on Doro, as he didn't want Smile to somehow find out his own unique way of tracking. Carefully, Lucien approached the back door. Again, with some easy spells, Lucien managed to leave Copper Coronet quietly and no one ever noticed him. Just in case, Lucien took a very roundabout way first. Instead of going back to his place directly, lying in his bed, Lucien felt kind of encouraged since now he was certain that he was not alone. He was comforted by the fact that there were still other apprentices working hard while carefully hiding from the church. He wondered how many apprentices, sorcerers, and sorceresses were there in Aalto in total. In the following few days, Lucien's life was pretty plain but peaceful. Lucien got up early in the morning to do some workout and then went to work. Sometimes he read music books, and sometimes religion and travel book. Sometimes he read in his own spirit library and analyzed the magic structures. Although Pierre could be kind of weird sometimes, when he was reading his music books, Lucien almost couldn't feel his existence. And luckily, Wolf had been out of town for a while, and no one else in the association would ever give them a hard time. Life was almost perfect these days. The only pity was that Lucien didn't have a chance to see Miss Sylvia, the famous violinist who was still single. According to Pierre, she was a goddess-like lady and was very talented. Since Pierre kept mentioning her for countless times, Lucien also started feeling curious. However, Mr. Sylvia didn't come to the association very often. While learning music, Lucien was still learning how to read, but the time spent on the latter was much shorter now, since he was learning really fast. Like the rest of the music students, after finishing the class, Lucien would stay at Mr. Victor's place and start another 2-hour piano practicing. Lucien's quality of being persistent helped him a lot. He never stopped practicing until he had really sore fingers and arms and sweated a lot. The evening was reserved to the study of magic. Nothing could pull Lucien out of the magic world in this period of time. On Friday evening, while Lucien was on his way to Auntie Elise's place, he noticed there were some doodle-like patterns at the very corner of a wall. Lucian quickly understood what they meant. 10 o'clock, Saturday night. The abandoned house in the easternmost area in Eastern Owl. Lucian's expression did not change at all. He kept calmly walking toward Elise's place as if he had seen nothing unusual. Lucian arrived at the place 10 minutes earlier in his black robe, with Ice Revenger on his left hand. Before Lucian left his place, he also checked all the magic reagents in the pockets of the robe. There was neither moon nor stars that night. Thick clouds covered all the light in the sky. As soon as Lucian arrived, he heard an owl hoot in the darkness. It was Dor standing on the tall willow, serving as a sentinel. Under the tree stood Smile in a black robe. In order to let Lucian recognize him, Smile didn't wear his hood. "Welcome, Mr. Professor." Smile walked toward Lucian and put on the hood. "I told the other members about you, and they were looking forward to your presence. Several apprentices also wanted to ask you for help with some magic problems. Of course, they will pay." Knowing that Smile was trying to test him, Lucian, however, didn't feel nervous. He was pretty sure that he was more advanced than most of his peer apprentices, although he couldn't guarantee that he was able to solve all the problems. "I major in astrology and element magic, so if these are questions related to those, I shall be able to help them a bit." Smile nodded. "Then please follow me, Mr. Professor." Smile stopped in front of the old wood door of the abandoned place. After knocking on the door in a unique rhythm, Smile mimicked an owl hoot. A few seconds later, a man wearing the same black robe opened the door slowly. When the man saw Lucian, he slightly nodded towards Lucian. "This must be Mr. Professor." Then, Lucian could tell it was not the man's real voice as well. "Yes, this is Mr. Professor." Smile's voice was also lower than the other night. "And Professor, this is Firewolf." "Nice to meet you." Lucian lowered his head slightly and greeted him. His left hand stayed in the sleeve, and his Ice Revenger was ready. After walking through the living room and another door, Firewolf led them to the storage room. At the corner of the room, there was a staircase that led underground. A basement. He wondered why he never thought about building a basement under his shack, instead of taking the risk and going down into the sewers every time. And at the same time, he could build a bigger crypt in Melzer Black Forest for practicing more powerful spells. This was not a very spacious basement. 11 low stools were placed surrounding a long table. Flickering candles sparsely illuminated the place. The other 8 apprentices were already sitting there. All of them were wearing black robes. Lucian walked downstairs with great caution, followed by Firewolf and Smile. They closed the door of the basement before they sat down. "Everyone, today we are honored to have Mr. Professor here to exchange ideas and thoughts with us." Smile stood up and started the introduction. "Mr. Professor is a real sorcerer. I'm sure our apprentice group meeting would benefit a lot from Mr. Professor's profound knowledge." Then Smile started introducing the apprentices present one by one. "This is White Honey, Morning Star, Reindeer, White Glove, Oak, Philosopher, Mercury and Hanger. The honor is all mine." Lucian slightly bowed. "Please forgive me for being so direct. I come here largely because of the journal, Arcana. Can I take a look at it first?" "No problem, Professor. Take your time and we can do random discussion first." Philosopher nodded and slowly handed Lucian a black hardback book. His voice sounded pretty old. "Besides, I heard from Al that you need a whole set of labwares and I brought them here tonight. I'll be glad to give them to you as a gift if you can solve a problem for me later." Lucian didn't open the book instantly, but carefully checked the cover of the book first. There were a few separate silver lines joining together in the end on the black cover, which formed the word, Arcana, right in the center. Under the name of the journal, a line of words wrote Volume 11, the year 392 of Saint Calendar. There were parchment pages inside it. From the content page, Lucian found there were 24 articles in the journal. The first one was discussion about the 5th failure of finding the new planets. Lucian felt interested in it and started reading. The theory of gravitation proposed by Douglas could explain lots of force field spells, even most spells of the astrology school. Besides, the 3 laws of planetary motion also derives from the theory, which is of great significance for guiding the field of fortune telling. Based on this theory, we have created many new and powerful spells. Thus we can say, if there are 2 major columns supporting the classical magic system, the theory of gravitation could be valued as the most important foundation for one of the columns, force field study. There is still one question remaining to be demonstrated. The theory of gravitation enables us to figure out many guiding formulas, and thus we know that the continent where we live in also belongs to a planet. The planet keeps rotating and at the same time revolving around the sun, so do the rest of the planets in the sky. Following the formulas mentioned above, we can also locate these planets. However, no one, not even the greatest sorcerer or sorceress, ever managed to reach the planets using the most advanced space magic, including me. Even we can calculate the coordinates of them, we can find none of them in the presumed places in space. When I was trying to cast the advanced space magic, Although I could not reach the planet, I could feel the gravity of the target planet from my presupposed transit spot. The planets are there, but at the same time, they are not there. When Lucien found out that the planets in this world could tell destinies, Lucien was already quite surprised. Now he felt surprised again, and very confused. Chapter 43, A Real Professor. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. After he roughly went through some of the formulas in the article, Lucien found that the formulas in this world were basically consistent with what he had learned before, at school. If there was no calculation mistake, the sorcerer should be able to locate and find the planet. However, including the author, no one ever managed to arrive on the target planet. So weird. Lucien thought to himself, feeling confused. Then he saw the author's introduction. Oliver Constantine, Grand Arcanist, Legendary Archmage, Level 3 in the profession of the Hand of Annihilation. It looks like the title of Grand Arcanist is even superior than Legendary Archmage, and the two titles are not overlapping. They should belong to different evaluation or ranking systems. The latter is decided by how powerful the sorcerer or sorceress is, while the former depends on one's contribution to the study of Arcana. Lucien was guessing. Then when he looked at the other authors' titles in the journal, his thought was proved right. All of them had two different titles. For example, Level 8 Arcanist, 9th Circle Astrology Mage, Level 6 Arcanist, 8th Circle Element Mage. Lucien also noticed that, in most cases, the authors' levels in Arcana were lower than their magic power ranks. Therefore, it seemed the achievement in academic study was even harder. Some of the rest of the articles were: Study of String Vibration in Some of the Magics, Brief Introduction of Differential Method and Infinite Series, Thoughts about Seven Bridge Problem, The Mutual Transformation Between Electricity and Magnetism in Magic. A New Element Detected by a New Method, A Forever Debate, Whether Spiritual Power Exists in the Form of Wave or Particle, A Study of Spirit Storm. While Lucien was reading the book, other apprentices were observing him in secret. Half an hour later, Lucien already had a general idea of the journal. The study of Arcana in this world could be understood as science on Earth. The development of mathematics and physics here was close to the one at the middle of the 18th century on Earth. Calculus had been basically built up, while there was a very rapid growth in the development of geometry. Also, the development in mechanics and electromagnetism had been pushed further in this world. At the same time, some spells here were beyond the comprehension of Earth's science. For example, space jump. As for element magic, it was close to the development level of chemistry in the early 19th century on Earth. Researchers, or say, arcanists, had determined what particles made the elements and had realized that earth, fire, wind and water were actually not elements. Besides, they had started measuring atomic weight as well. But the journal was published 20 years ago. Lucien speculated that the current development level of Arcana should be even more advanced. After he closed the journal, Lucien found that all the apprentices present were looking at him. He smiled and asked, "It's a very interesting book. Can I keep it for about 2 weeks? As long as you can answer my questions, Mr. Professor." The voice of philosopher sounded very old. "Of course, philosopher, you may ask now." Knowing that the elder apprentice was trying to test him, Lucien was pretty confident. He believed that his knowledge should be enough to answer some apprentice questions. Philosopher took out a stack of papers filled with words and numbers. "Professor, since you specialize in element and astrology, I have some questions for you related to the first article in the journal. When I first met these formulas which can predict the orbiting of stars, I was so fascinated, but I couldn't understand how they were derived and why they actually work. Can you explain it for us, sir?" It seemed like a shared question for all the apprentices present. All of them turned around and were waiting for Lucien's explanation. Within Lucien's expectation, what philosopher asked was related to celestial mechanics. He answered calmly, "Your question is too big to be fully explained at a time, because it involves too many different aspects. Tonight I can explain to you the basic principles of the formula and how to use them. Are you okay with it?" "Sure, Mr. Professor," philosopher answered politely. "This symbol represents gravitational constant." Some of you may wonder, what is gravity? Well, gravity is the force that makes you fall back to the ground when you jump up without using any magic, the force that makes apples drop. These phenomena never follow the will of God, and they should not be taken for granted. Lucien was trying to make his explanation simple, and when the other apprentices interrupted him to ask why, he just answered in this way: "In order to explain this question, many more concepts and principles will be involved, and they cannot be comprehended when you are apprentices. After you become real sorcerers and sorceresses, these questions will be easier to be studied." That was actually because Lucien himself did not fully understand the underlying principles of the formula as well. Philosopher sighed with emotion. "One can never learn enough in the world of magic. Before I thought I had made some progress in this field, but now I just realized I'm way far from that." The rest of the apprentices also nodded toward these formulas. Although the mysterious professor did not explain why, he indeed clarified how, from which they were provided with new ideas about how to analyze and construct many new magic structures. After Lucian finished his lecture, Philosopher fell silent. After a few seconds, he grabbed his quill and started writing numbers on a piece of paper excitedly. Other apprentices were also lost in thought. Mr. Professor, I want to apologize for suspecting you were a liar. White Honey was a female, who did not speak very much before. You're the most elegant and erudite sorcerer I've ever seen. Although she was trying to make herself sound like an elder woman, she was too excited to hide her original charming voice. From her comment, Lucian, Smile and Oak immediately drew an important conclusion. White Honey was a member of more than one apprentice group. Lucian answered in his pretended harsh voice, I accept your apology. But actually, I don't really care what other people think of me. My knowledge and power is always mine. Later, when White Honey, Smile and Oak were exchanging magic materials, Lucian also bought some of them. Laying the right hand on his forehead, Philosopher made a deep bow towards Lucian. It was the manner of the ancient sorcerers. I want to extend my sincere thanks to you, sir, my mentor. Philosopher said, excitedly, your explanation solved many of my questions. I'm hoping that, with your help, I can figure out how to analyze the key first circle astrology magic, in order to become a real sorcerer. Mr. Professor, to show my appreciation I hope you can accept this set of labware. Besides, you can choose any one of my stuff here. Mr. Professor, I heard that you need corpse mushroom, and I've brought them here. I'm not sure if you're willing to solve a question of mine. Mercury was another female in the group, who sounded quite nervous but also excited. Other apprentices were looking at Lucian respectfully, hoping to learn more from him. Lucian started feeling that he was a real professor now. Chapter 44, Knowledge is Money. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Mercury took out a small box, in which there were 3 corpse mushrooms. One was darker than the other 2. She asked politely, you can take them all if you're willing to answer my question, sir. Corpse mushroom was required in many magic potions. The average price was about 10 nars, and the darker ones were even more expensive. If they were badly in need, the price could be doubled or even more. Lucian couldn't resist the offer. He nodded. All right. Mercury found the article in the journal titled A New Element Detected by a New Method and asked, my question is about the basic elements. The author defines Ti, which is extracted from sunstones, as an element in this article, but I thought only earth, fire, wind and water were basic elements. Her voice was slightly trembling, as if she knew that the answer to her question would overthrow all of her previous knowledge about element magic. In fact, the question was related to the important difference between the ancient and the contemporary magic system. Well, after a while, Lucian finally responded, honestly speaking, I'm not sure neither. I studied the ancient magic system like all of you. In the past, I often found conflicts between some theories in my own experiment practices, and thus I started putting more thoughts on it. The reason that I'm able to explain those formulae is not because I already have a deep understanding of them, but because many of the corresponding questions have been existing in my mind for a long time, and the article just solved them. It was very suspicious that a sorcerer who claimed himself to have nothing to do with the Continental Congress of Magic could understand all of the formula in the article, but Lucian was too excited to realize the fact when he first read the journal. Now he had to restrain himself a bit. That's why I was only explaining the application of the formulas. As for the principles lying behind them, they're also strange to me. Lucian continued. He did not want to take even a slight risk of being suspected. This article showed the process and the result of an experiment, with only a few formulas. I can only share some of my thoughts roughly toward the theories mentioned in it, but I can be wrong. No problem, sir, Mercury answered firmly, and turned to the other apprentices, and I want to invite all of you here to join our discussion. This kind of instruction could be very expensive. Without the questioner's permission, others were usually not allowed to listen to it. Important information sometimes would be protected by a special magic called secret communication in order to avoid eavesdropping. I heard that there has been a long time discussion between sorcerers and sorceresses on whether the belief of 4 basic elements of the world is just a myth. Lucian started analyzing. Many believe that the real elements should be more abstract, and should be more than just 4 kinds. The other apprentices nodded thoughtfully. Many of them had the same doubt as well when they were conducting magic experiments. I'm not sure what are the real elements instead. But from this article, it seems like they have redefined element and found many new ones through different experiments. The experiment in this article was an example. The author showed his way to find the new element, by using the 9th circle magic firestorm to bombard sunstone in an enclosed magic circle. The author obtained a beautiful and pure crystal called Ti, which was both more flexible and lighter than mithril. Lucian speculated that there was no periodic table of the elements in this world yet. But in this magic world, Elements here were probably totally unpredictable. In order to show the conflict between the ancient element theory and real-life practice, Lucian took a few apprentice element magics for example. After hearing his idea, the rest of the apprentices present were very excited. Mr. Professor. I believe you're right. Being explained in this way, many of my experiment questions can be easily solved. Mercury was very grateful. Thank you so much, Mr. Professor. Hanger, who was standing in the corner all the time, also could hardly conceal his excitement. Mr. Professor, what about spirit? Is it also composed of certain elements? I don't have the materials you need, but you can choose anything you want in my bag. The other apprentices now held no suspicion of Lucian's identity. They all firmly believed that Lucian was the most knowledgeable sorcerer they had ever met, and were all eagerly hoping that the great sorcerer could share more of his ideas with them. Disappointingly, Lucian shook his head. Sorry, I haven't dipped into necromancy, so I cannot answer your question. After putting the 3 corpse mushrooms into his pocket and taking Philosopher's suitcase, Lucian asked, do you have extra corpse mushroom or revenant dust? I want to buy more, or you can ask more questions. The brain tissue of the aquatic zombie was enough for about 7 to 8 experiments, and each of them would consume 1 corpse mushroom. Lucian hoped that he could collect the materials as much as possible. Since the church has been keeping an eye on us for a long time and it's too risky to cultivate the mushroom by ourselves, corpse mushroom is very rare these days. Except Mercury, I don't think other apprentices here would be able to offer you more, Mr. Professor. Philosopher answered respectfully. He seemed like the leader of the group. Like White Honey, Philosopher was a member of another 2 sorcerer groups. But the other sorcerers and sorceresses he had met were all very arrogant. They would only help the other group members who could offer something they really want, or give instructions to their own apprentices. Therefore, he was very grateful for Lucian's help. Compared with corpse mushroom, revenant dust is even harder to find. White Honey added, the formation of revenant requires strong grievance and resentment gathering in a certain way. Although using the blood of some evil creatures can summon revenants, the blood is even more precious than the dust itself. After all, this is a Alto. Lucian was kind of disappointed, but he quickly moved on. Later he answered more questions raised by the other group members and got more materials and magic reagents in return. Lucian's knowledge earned great respect for him among the apprentices. Besides respect, Lucian also earned a whole set of magic labware, 3 corpse mushroom, many other magic materials and reagents. Just like the saying goes, knowledge is money. Chapter 45, Lucian's Magic Lab. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. When Lucian had found most of the materials that he needed, it was time for him to call it a day. I got to go now, said Lucian in his pretended harsh voice. We can continue over the next meeting. He also had to go back and review his physics and chemistry knowledge in order to explain more questions in better ways for the group members. To show their thankfulness, all of the apprentices stood up, laying their right hands on their foreheads, and bowed low to Lucian. Mr. Professor, can we have the honor to keep you staying a bit longer? Each of us is going to share our recent thoughts by presenting them to the others later. It would be our great pleasure to have you here. Philosopher hopefully asked. The discussion part was open to anyone. All of the apprentices present were hoping Lucian would possibly make comments on their ideas. Even some random words from such a knowledgeable sorcerer could benefit them a great deal. For Lucian, the invitation was an extra surprise tonight. Although Lucian could understand many advanced formula based on his previous knowledge, he, on the contrary, was having a hard time analyzing some of the apprentice spells. Concealing his excitement, Lucian was trying to make himself sound as calm as possible. All right. Thank you, Professor. White Honey first showed her appreciation. It was a productive discussion, from which Lucian also gained a lot from the other group members. Many of his questions related to apprentice magics were solved and his knowledge gap was filled. At the same time, the other apprentices were also every encouraged to see that Mr. Professor was actually paying attention to their discussion. In the early morning, after exchanging some more information, the meeting was drawing to a close. Lucian was stopped by Philosopher when he was about to leave. Mr. Professor, asked Philosopher hopefully, do you mind leaving your contact information to me? So if we can find any revenant dust, we can contact you immediately. However, Lucian shook his head. Sorry, I'd rather not. Al knows how to contact me. Cautious as Lucian was, he would never trust anyone easily. Well, Philosopher nodded disappointingly. Will you attend our next meeting 2 weeks from now? The other apprentices present were also waiting for Lucian's answer eagerly. I don't know yet. Lucian's attitude was ambiguous. Since he did not want his attendance to be regular, I might be in Melzer Black Forest at that time, preparing some experiments. Anyway, I'll let Al know in advance. But Lucian's vague answer was good enough for the members. At least this great sorcerer didn't refuse them directly. After Smile made sure that it was safe outside, Lucian and other apprentices left the basement in succession. Having the suitcase in his hand, and some new magic materials in his pockets, Lucien walked home with no companion. On his way home, Lucien spread his spiritual power, which covered a certain range to detect if there was anyone following him, and all he found was a raven. He didn't feel even slightly relieved until he was finally back in his shack. 1 week later, using the magic which could turn stone into soil and mud, Lucien successfully dug a pit very close to his place. The 3 meters long, 2.5 meters wide pit connected to his shack with a small stone stairway was Lucien's new and also his first magic lab. Standing on a small stool, Lucien was carving lines on the wall with a silver dagger which came from the labware set. He was creating a magic circle in order to block energy waves caused by spellcasting or magic experiments. In addition to that, Lucien cast some more magic circles to protect the lab. Using echo-illumination, no one would notice that there was a basement under there by simply stamping on the floor. Other magic circles were used for placing magic traps which could be triggered when necessary. After the carving work was done, Lucien pulled out a small bag of black powder. The powder was made from black curving vine and it could quickly stick to almost everything. Carefully picking it out with a dagger, Lucien colored these lines with the black powder, and then he poured mercury on them little by little. Amazingly, the mercury did not drip at all. Instead, it was instantly absorbed by the power. Now the outline of the magic circle was very distinct. Pressing his palm in the center of the pattern, Lucien spread out his spiritual power and activated the magic circle. The silver lines were lit bit by bit. After a burst of silver light, the magic circle completely disappeared in the wall as if nothing ever existed there at all. Lucien stepped down from the stool, feeling exhausted. Building a magic circle could be very tiring. The more troublesome part was that, 10 days later, it had to be replaced with a new one when the power of the circle was gone. For real sorcerers or sorceresses, they could maintain their magic circle using their own spiritual power, or building much more complicated ones which could recover the power automatically by themselves. Some parts of magic creatures, like their fur, horn or blood, could also do the job. Then it was the last step. Casting the spell in an opposite way, Lucien built a long stone table from the soil. Placing all the glasswares and small stoves on the table, Lucien was more than happy and satisfied. The lab was ready. From now on, Lucien finally had his own place to practice spells and conduct experiments. Obviously, this basement, although not very spacious, was much better than the cold, stinky sewers. Standing on the stairs, Lucien nodded with great satisfaction. Then Lucien went back to his place upstairs and locked the entrance with magic after making sure the magic trap circle was also in position. It was already in the early morning. As soon as Lucien's head hit the pillow, he fell asleep. He had to go to work in the library a few hours later. Like I said. Pierre stared at Lucien with concern. You gotta control yourself a bit. I just didn't sleep well last night. Lucien shook his head slowly. By the way, what musical instrument are you learning, Lucien? Pierre suddenly switched the topic. Chapter 46, Sylvia. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Piano. Lucien answered. Mr. Victor has improved his harpsichord and renamed it piano. Soon he will register the new musical instrument in the association. While Lucien had made some progress in learning magic, he never slacked off in studying music. After all, he needed a decent job to make a living, and more importantly, to disguise his identity. Being a musician would be ideal enough. After all, no one would easily suspect an elegant and young musician to be an evil and notorious sorcerer. Harpsichord. Piano. Pierre repeated thoughtfully. Suddenly he became excited and dashed into the bookshelves. A moment later, Pierre came back with a book in his hand. You're gonna need the book. I gained a lot from it. By the way, did I ever tell you that in 4 months I'll take the qualification test of the association? If I can pass it, I'll finally be a qualified musician. Like other associations, the Musicians Association also practiced monopoly. The evaluation of musician was completely controlled by it. No, you never mentioned it. Lucien took over the book titled The Art of Harpsichord Performance, but I believe you can do it, Pierre, said Lucien sincerely. In the next hour, Pierre did not give Lucien any time to study the book. Since he knew that Lucien was also a music student, Pierre tried to seize every chance to share his thought on music with his buddy. However, today was definitely not a good time for discussion since Lucien was too sleepy to follow Pierre. His eyelids were so heavy that he could barely keep his eyes open. Lucien did try to stop Pierre many times, but Pierre never let him have a chance to cut in. Fortunately, at this time, a lady wearing a long white dress and a black pillbox hat walked into the library. She was a very elegant lady, her waist was slender and her legs rangy, as if she just walked out of a fine picture. Lucien also noticed her long white stockings, which made the lady's legs look even sexier. However, that was not Lucien's focus. Instead, he was thinking about where that rayon-like material came from. Probably it was a byproduct of alchemy. Good morning, Miss Sylvia. Suddenly switching his attitude, Pierre greeted the lady politely and slightly nudged Lucien. Anything I can do for you today? Lucien then realized she was the Sylvia that Pierre was talking about all the time. Her long black hair was like silk, shiny and soft. Under her small lovely nose, there were cherry-like lips. For sure, she was very beautiful and graceful. Morning, Pierre. I need to borrow several books. They are, said Sylvia with a sweet smile on her face. She had got used to people's special attention, so Lucien's long stare didn't bother her. Pierre's face instantly flushed with excitement, since he never expected that Sylvia would remember his name. He nodded several times and dashed into the shelves again to get the books for his goddess. Lucien stayed behind the counter. A sweet and familiar fragrance slipped into his nose. Not until a few seconds later did Lucien realize that the smell was very similar to that of the black veil he found in the dump site, the expensive cloth called Black Nightingale. But Lucien couldn't make sure, and there was also no need for him to figure out whether Miss Sylvia was the veil's owner or not. After all, the smell was still slightly different. Out of nervousness and excitement, the more Pierre wanted to impress Miss Sylvia, the more clumsy he was. After a few minutes, he started feeling embarrassed. You need my help there? Lucien turned around and asked. Then Lucien walked directly toward a bookshelf and pulled out one of the books Miss Sylvia was looking for in front of Pierre's face. Of course, it was not because of Lucien's good memory, but his amazing spirit library, which could even store the arrangement of the whole library. Lucien. Pierre's mouth dropped open. When did you become so familiar with the place? With a pile of books in his arms, Lucien came to Sylvia and asked politely, Ma'am, do you want me to take these books to the reading room? Of course, Lucien couldn't claim that he had no man's thoughts when he was looking at such a beautiful woman like Sylvia. But Lucien knew that a romantic relationship was too luxury and impractical to be put in his future plans for now. Therefore, Lucien's indifferent attitude contrasted sharply with Pierre's nervousness. Just leave them on the table, please. Someone else will get them later. Sylvia's voice was husky and sexy. What's your name? I never saw you before. My name's Lucien Evans. I'm new here, answered Lucien slowly. Then he added, I'm Mr. Victor's student. I see. Sylvia smiled sweetly. No wonder. I heard that Mr. Victor had successfully improved harpsichord and named it piano. Please tell him that I'm really looking forward to his concert, Lucien. The quick change of Lucien's attitude was a bit strange for Sylvia. When she just walked in the library, Lucien was staring at her legs like a pervert, while now it seemed that Lucien was not interested in women at all. After Lucien finished registering the borrowed books, Sylvia thanked them and left the library. Lucien noticed that there was a lady wearing a black pillbox hat waiting for Miss Sylvia. Standing there straightly like a spear, the slim lady was taller than Lucien by about half a head. Behind the lady stood a beautiful young maid and an elegant middle-aged woman. Noticing that someone was looking at them, the poker-faced, middle-aged woman instantly threw Lucien a cold eye. At that moment, Lucien felt he was suddenly thrown off a cliff and all the colors of the world faded. As if the woman had a rough ocean in her eyes, Lucien couldn't stop trembling in front of the huge waves of the ocean. Lucien lost his ability of thinking. He didn't fully recover until he could only see the woman's back. The woman and the slim lady changed a few words and the latter looked back at Lucien with some amusement in her eyes. But Lucien could also feel the great pressure in it and her authoritative aura. Who are they? Lucien was astonished. He had never met someone like them before in this world, especially the middle-aged woman. It felt like her gaze could easily disarm Lucien completely. Pierre came close to Lucien and made a long sigh. Sylvia, she's my goddess. I know. I was not very impressive though. Then he nudged Lucien. But buddy, you can't just stare at Miss Sylvia's legs like that. That's too much. But Lucien paid no attention to what Pierre just said. Wait, why do you look even paler now, Lucien? Pierre asked, surprised. Chapter 47, Victor's Trouble. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Weekly, Lucien asked in a trembling voice. By Pierre. Do you know who the other three madams are? Lucien found himself only being able to recall the eyes of the last young lady, of her dangerous, blue eyes. Nope, but I could imagine what happened. Pierre shrugged his shoulders. Miss Sylvia has many noble lady friends, and some of them are knights who have awakened the blessing. Well, you were staring at her legs so impolitely, so one of her friends probably just gave you a lesson using her knight power. I see. I wonder if the younger lady was Princess Natasha. Her power was so overwhelming. Except Princess Natasha, I don't think there's another female knight in Alto who has such power. And the middle-aged woman standing beside her might be her guard. Lucien said to Pierre thoughtfully. No matter who they are, my friend, the noble ladies have nothing to do with you, and never will. Pierre patted Lucien on his shoulder. Noble ladies would never waste a second on common folks like us. Although everyone was endowed with a blessing, offsprings of nobles always had a better chance of awakening the power. Therefore, Nobles would never marry common people but only nobles in order to keep their blood pure. Miss Sylvia is my goddess but is too far away from me. All we can rely on is music, buddy," said Pierre earnestly, although he was the one who flushed his face just now. In the following several hours, Lucien was being tortured by his sleepiness. At noon, Lucien refused Pierre's invitation of having lunch together and was going back home to get some rest. When Lucien was walking downstairs, he saw Elena was talking joyfully with a tall and young man who had shining blonde hair and a very well-featured, pretty face. From his fancy clothes, Lucien could tell the man was a noble. Soon the man bid farewell to Elena and walked upstairs, passing by Lucien. He was really a very good-looking man. Lucien came downstairs and talked to Elena half-jokingly. "You have feelings for him? Come on, Lucien. You're my friend, and you can't tell that was fake smile on my face?" Gently rubbing her face, Elena answered in a low voice, "He's Mackenzie Griffith, the second in line of the Griffith family, Director Othello's student, and also, the #1 playboy in our association." The Griffith family? Lucien heard the name before. "Yes, Griffith." Elena nodded. "If I'm not mistaken, you know Lot, right? Mackenzie is his elder cousin. He's very good at playing harpsichord and violin." "I see. But why you don't like him? And why were you still pretending?" asked Lucien. "Well, I know I shouldn't talk like this about a noble, but he's a bastard." As a notorious playboy, Mackenzie is known for his misbehavior. He especially enjoys conquering women who do not have interest in him, who treat him coldly. It is said that once there was a girl from a common family who refused Mackenzie a few times. In the end he. Elena pursed her lips with strong disgust. "Be careful, Elena," he said with concern, "but in a couple of years, you'll be married, I guess." "Get married?" Elena slightly sighed and her eyes looked sad. After seeing so many elegant musicians and gentlemen in the association, now it's impossible for me to marry an ordinary guy. What Elena said was true. Once a person had enjoyed many delicacies, plain bread and water became hard to swallow. "Then what's your plan, Elena?" As a friend, Lucien did care about her. "Well, probably to be a mistress of a noble or famous musician." Elena laughed when she saw Lucien's astonished face. "I'm just joking. I've saved some money and I'm gonna learn music like you, Lucien." "Wow, that's really cool, Elena." Lucien was impressed. An independent and hard-working girl was always impressive. "I know. Miss Sylvia is my idol. I wish someday I could also be an elegant and beautiful female music master like her." For such a music goddess, nobody would say that staying single in her age is a big deal, because she doesn't need a man at all. She has the world of music. Although I know many musicians in our association have a crush on her. Well, Mr. Victor is not included. Mr. Victor's wife had passed away almost 10 years ago. Since then Victor remained single and put all his passion into music. Everyone in the association knew that, including Lucien. "So are you gonna be Miss Sylvia's student?" asked Lucien. "I'll try, but Miss Sylvia rarely looks for new students." Elena nodded. Her green eyes were filled with happiness and excitement. "Or I can be your student, Lucien, when you become a good musician." She smiled. "It will be my pleasure." Lucien also laughed. With plenty of magic materials, Lucien didn't attend the apprentice meeting for the following several times. He had copied the journal Arcana in his spirit library before he buried it at the foot of the wall to let Smile take it back. From the marks left by Smile, Lucien could tell they were pretty disappointed and were still looking forward to his presence. But Lucien did not want to rush. He still needed a few more weeks to fully absorb the knowledge that he gained from both the journal and the last meeting. Time went by. When Lucien was able to cast 9 apprentice-level spells consecutively at a time and was very close to moving to the next level, Intermediate Apprentice, there was only 1 month left before Mr. Victor's concert was held in the Somme Hall. Being uninspired, this musician again became anxious and fretful. The tune of the 4th and also the last symphony just wouldn't come in Victor's mind. Soon he got too stressed to teach so many students, so he had no choice but to suspend the class for those non-music students for a whole month. But his unusual testiness was still very obvious in the music students' eyes. Bang! Something that sounded like an ink bottle fell on the floor and all of the students downstairs raised their heads. It was not the first time that day. "Well, we gotta do something. Breaking stuff definitely can't help with getting inspiration." Lot shrugged his shoulders. Chapter 48, In the Hall. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Chris_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Since the success and reputation of a teacher was also directly related to the students, Lot and Felicia were also quite worried. "Do something?" Felicia rolled her eyes. "Do what?" Frowning his eyebrows, Lot answered thoughtfully. "A symphony is a quite long piece of music and usually consists of 4 parts. For a concert, 4 symphonies are enough." "I don't understand why Mr. Victor insists on creating new symphonies. After all, he got so many good ones he wrote before to choose from." Mr. Victor did pick out the best one, and it will be one of the 4 symphonies. Standing beside, Othy joined their conversation, but it is also the only ready-made one from the 4 symphonies. Mr. Victor felt all the others are nowhere close to the best one. In order to present an excellent concert, Mr. Victor has to make sure all the pieces of music are equally impressive. Rubbing his eyes, Herodotus sighed. Mr. Victor always wanted to be perfect. His previous works were actually very popular among many musicians and nobles, or he would never be qualified to give a concert in the Somme Hall. If we try, probably we can persuade him. He looked at Lot and Felicia, while Lucien, a poor student who could only play the simplest music for now, was subconsciously ignored by him. What do you think, Mr. Othy? Asked Felicia. She knew that, among all the people in the sitting room, Othy was the one who knew Mr. Victor the best. After all, Othy had been taking care of Victor for almost 30 years. Unfortunately, I don't think so. Slowly, Othy shook his head. The concert is of great significance for Victor. He wants to fulfill the wish of his late wife, which is to have a perfect performance in the Somme Hall, thus he won't make any compromise. Probably. We can look for some potions that are helpful for him to relax. As an apprentice, Lucien's first idea was seeking the help of potions and drugs. No, we can't. Those drugs will slow down one's mind and cause the inhibition of inspiration. Othy denied Lucien's proposal seriously. But we can't just let Mr. Victor torture himself like this, said Lucien with concern. Then what can you do, Lucien? Come up with a new masterpiece for Mr. Victor, said Herodotus with clear sarcasm. He never liked Lucien. If you cannot, please shut up. Lucien didn't feel really offended. Instead, what Herodotus just said gave him some new thoughts. Mr. Victor needed his help, Lucien knew. When they were talking, Victor opened the door and walked downstairs, looking very tired. The students stopped their conversation instantly and looked at him. Victor's hair was messy, and his eyes red. I'm going to the association to practice the first 3 symphonies. All of you come with me to see how the different parts of the orchestra cooperates. Although all of them were a bit relieved to see that Victor's mood had returned to normal, they knew the trouble still remained unsolved. On the 5th floor of the association, the orchestra was playing a magnificent symphony. The 4 parts of the symphony were integrated perfectly and together provided the audiences with a grand acoustic feast. As soon as the orchestra finished playing the last part, a cold applause came from behind. All the students looked backwards. It was Wolf. Good, very good. It looks like you're ready for the concert, Victor. Holding his chin high, Wolf still looks the same, arrogant and mean. Victor enjoyed a period of peaceful time when Wolf was out of town, and now apparently the happy time was over. Victor's face instantly darkened since he knew Wolf must have heard something. Before Victor said anything, Wolf asked with a fake smile on his face, I remember you asked for my advice before I left. Now I'm back, so let me see your work. You just heard it. Victor just wanted to cut the conversation short as much as he could. No, I mean all the 4 symphonies. Wolf lifted his eyebrows. Wolf, you. Victor was very pissed off. Before his rage took over, 2 men walked into the hall. One of them was a white-haired old man, wearing a decent black suit and with a black cane in his hand. The other was the good-looking blonde that Lucien met a few weeks ago, Mackenzie, who was Lot's elder cousin. Director. Putting their argument aside temporarily, both Victor and Wolf slightly bowed to the old man. Victor's students also bowed following their teacher. It was Lucien's first time meeting Baron Othello, director of the association, who was also Mackenzie's mentor. In the law among nobles, which was constructed over a long time, those noble offsprings who managed to awaken their blessing in their blood and thus became royal knights were more qualified to inherit their titles, but it was not to say that the rest of them who failed to awaken the blood power could not be the next head of their houses. As a gifted musician, Othello was also the only son of his house, thus he rightly inherited the title of his family and became the Baron. Victor, I heard that you're having a hard time with the 4th symphony? Othello walked to Victor and asked him seriously. Victor nodded his head, his eyes lowered. Yes, sir. Othello slightly raised the cane in his hand along with his voice. You must know how important this concert is. You're representing our association to play in front of Grand Duke and the Princess, and you gotta make sure nothing will go wrong. Do you understand? I do, sir. I will make sure every piece of work will be really impressive, answered Victor in a low voice. At least I'm trying my best. Wolf gave Victor a loud snort on the side. No, I'm not asking for everything to be that impressive, Victor, nodded Othello. I'm asking for a safe and smooth performance. I understand your pressure, but you cannot keep delaying like this. You have to hand in all of your music as soon as possible to give the orchestra enough time to practice. Then Othello paused a bit. Well, let me give you a deadline. By the last week before the concert, I want to see all of your work laying on my office desk. Any problem, Victor? Victor shook his head with great effort. No, sir. He knew that if he still could not come up with a last symphony, Someone else in the association would replace him very soon. I hope you understand why I'm pushing you. Othello looked less serious now. I believe you can do it, Victor. The director nodded to show his encouragement and then walked out of the hall. At this time, Mackenzie approached Lot with a smile on face. My dear little cousin, I hope you won't have any trouble with the musician qualification test like your teacher is having here. Although I'll be one of the examiners in the next 3 years and I'm very looking forward to your violin performance, my integrity will never allow me to lower my standard. I don't need you to lower your standard, answered Lot, clenching his teeth. Then Mackenzie turned to Lucien. You know what? As a pauper, how lucky you are that you may have the chance to be a musician. It's not really wise wasting your time on fooling around with girls instead of practicing your skills. Lucien was very confused when he just heard Mackenzie's comment, but soon he realized he was talking about Elena. Recently, Elena spent some time with Lucien in order to learn more about music. Then Mackenzie left and caught up with Othello with a lovely smile on his face. In the family of Griffith, as the second in line to inherit the title, Mackenzie always spared no effort to please the housemaster. Oh my! Victor, you're still racking your wits about your last masterpiece. Pretending that he didn't know the fact before, there was a smile of triumph on Wolf's face. Enjoy, Victor. Enjoy your first play in the Somme Hall, cause it may as well be the last. Before Wolf left, he glanced at Lucien. Is this your talented pauper student, Victor? Well, wish him good luck with his qualification test in the future. After all, your reputation is directly related to his. What a poor young lad. Wolf was amused by his own words. Laughing, he went out of the hall, while Lucien noticed that Victor's face was flushed and the blue veins on his hand stood out. Chapter 49, Symphony of Destiny. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Victor didn't loosen his fist until the gate of the hall slowly closed. With a long sigh, he turned around and said to Ryan and the rest of the orchestra, I'm going back to my office to finish my work. Everyone, keep practicing please. Mr. Victor, please don't push yourself too much. Ryan put down his violin and walked to Victor. His face looked serious. I don't think you can come up with a good melody with your current mood. Victor's mind was being bothered by fatigue, depression and anger at the same time. He nodded. Thank you, Ryan. I just need some rest. Lucien, Lot, you two accompany Mr. Victor to his office. Felicia and Herodotus, you two keep practicing, Ryan said to the students. On the way to the third floor, Victor didn't say anything. Neither Lucien nor Lot knew what to do, so they just followed him silently. Before leaving the office, Lucien noticed that Victor was looking at a lifelike portrait hanging on the wall. On the portrait there was a beautiful young woman with a smile on her face. She had black hair and black eyes. When Lucien closed the door, Victor was still staring at the portrait like a statue. When Lucien and Lot came back to the practice room on the fourth floor, they saw Felicia and Herodotus were lost in thought. Well, Lot tried to break the silence. All Director Othello asked was to give a smooth concert. Mr. Victor might feel less stress now. Apparently, his words didn't help. Come on. I care about Mr. Victor's performance very much, okay? Lot hurriedly added, you all saw my cousin Mackenzie. If Mr. Victor's concert can be a huge success, I can call myself the student of a top musician, which will help me with my qualification test. Felicia puckered her mouth a bit. Yes, we were all linked to Mr. Victor. I'm worried about him. If the concert goes wrong, I can't imagine what is waiting for him. On the other side, Herodotus leaned his forehead against his violin, murmuring. Lucien got ignored again, but he didn't care at all. He was also busy with thinking. In order to repay Victor's kindness, Lucien was looking for a musical masterpiece from his world as a plan B. Before that, he had gone through all the songs in his spirit library to make sure there was nothing similar to what he was going to choose. The work was actually easier than Lucien thought, since all the songs were stored in Lucien's spirit library and he could easily search them in his storage. Then Lucien had to find a proper way to give the music to Mr. Victor. Fortunately, Lucien had finished the difficult part, translation. When Lucien was practicing reading music here, he marked many masterpieces from his world with the notes he had learned here. During this period of time, Lucien had a better understanding toward the music trend in this world. Being affected by the church, music in alto featured traditional structure and religious style. Lucien wanted to choose one that fitted the trend. Therefore, Bach came first to his mind since his music also had some religious taste. However, after comparing Bach's work with many musical masterpieces in this world, Lucien found they were somehow too similar to each other. He was glad that he was cautious enough. Then Lucien turned to Beethoven. Fortunately, none of Beethoven's work overlapped the music from this world. Lucien didn't want to waste much time on selecting, and thus he soon decided to use one of Beethoven's most well-known masterpieces, Symphony No. 5. Lucien still remembered when he first heard it. He was shocked by the great momentum of the symphony. The most difficult part that Lucien had to think about was how to give it to Victor. Lucien couldn't just directly hand Victor a piece of paper with such an excellent music masterpiece on it, telling Victor that he found it in a book in the library. On the other hand, it would be even more suspicious if he claimed that he came up with the melody by himself, since a beginner like him writing a piece of symphony like this would obviously make no sense. Lucien wished he knew how to do hypnosis, but his current spiritual power was not enough to infuse a whole piece of symphony into Victor's mind. Finally, he decided to rewrite Symphony No. 5, but instead of revitalizing it, Lucien was going to degrade it. Lucien needed to destroy the whole structure of the masterpiece but leave some fragments for Victor. Lucien was hoping that his teacher could get inspired from these fragments. After writing a small piece of melody down on the paper, Lucien sat down in front of the piano and heavily pressed the keyboard with his hands. Dang 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 dang. It was so loud that Herodotus almost fell off his chair. Following the magnificent beginning, the rest part of the melody was like a disaster. "What the heck are you doing?" Lot asked while frowning his eyebrows. "I want to help Mr. Victor. What I saw today made me feel depressed but also angry, and this combined emotion just gave me some inspiration. I'm going to write it down," Lucien explained. "What?" Lot almost laughed. "Are you saying you are writing a symphony? How long have you been learning music? You don't really understand how to play piano yet." Felicia's voice became higher. Spreading his hands, Lot replied directly. "No, you're not able to help Mr. Victor, Lucien. I understand your will, but you are just a beginner. You think everyone can write a symphony just because they have so-called inspiration." Herodotus sneered. "What you just played was rubbish. Stop showing off in front of Mr. Victor to please him, you jester." "Lucien, please stop." Felicia shook her head with depression. "Can you just stop? Don't make the situation harder." But Lucien also shook his head firmly. I'm inspired. I can write a good one." Lot, Felicia and Herodotus were staring at Lucien as if he was a madman. Chapter 50, Composing. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Lucien kept playing. He could only press the keys one by one since the skills required in this symphony were far beyond his beginner level. Lot, Felicia and Herodotus felt there was a heavy hammer knocking on their heads. Their anxiety and anger were accumulating. "Enough!" Herodotus and Lot cried out at the same time. "What?" Lucien turned his head and looked at them innocently. "Mr. Victor asked us to practice. And I am practicing." "Then what are you two doing here?" Lucien, gripping his fists. Herodotus's face flushed with anger. However, he was too short and thin for a fight. Lucien had been practicing fighting for a while and was half a head taller than him. A few seconds later, Herodotus shook his fist in the air. "I don't want to be punished by Mr. Victor for beating you up." Then he turned around and burst out of the practice room. "Sorry about the noise." Lucien shrugged his shoulder but had no plan to stop. He grabbed his quill again and wrote more music notes down. The melody now only contained small pieces of the masterpiece, but most of it were Lucien's stupid creation. "Are you serious, Lucien?" Lot was looking at the ceiling of the room, rubbing his forehead. "You wanna have a look?" Lucien was about to shove his piece of paper into Lot's hand, but the latter directly rejected. Lot looked at Felicia. "Let's go. Staying here for one more second will drive me crazy." She nodded. "You're right. I need some fresh air." Finally, as he wished, Lucien was left alone in the practice room. After locking the door, Lucien went back to work. He started adding more pieces from Symphony No. 5 into the melody, hoping that he could come up with a degraded version of Symphony No. 5 with lots of imperfection, and thus Victor could improve it to restore it to a real symphony masterpiece. In order to show the progress, Lucien had to provide many drafts. Also, Lucien needed to practice lots of times to make sure his poor playing wouldn't completely ruin the music. At least he had to show some of the value of the music in front of his teacher. In the following several hours, the drafts of many versions piled up on the desk and the pile was growing taller and taller. Playing many parts of the music over and over again, Lucien was sweating all over. When the sky became darker, Lucien stretched himself a bit and then left the practice room with a thick stack of paper in his hand. Lot, Felicia and Herodotus were sitting in the hall, watching Mr. Victor conducting the orchestra. When Lucien came in, they rolled their eyes simultaneously with antipathy. However, Lucien in turn gave them a big smile. Felicia shook her head with a long sigh. Sitting in the soft audience seat, Lucien closed his eyes and continued thinking about his work. Half an hour later, the rehearsal finished. Victor and Ryan came down from the stage and walked in front of them. Mr. Victor now looked much better. "How was the practice this afternoon, everyone?" "Any problems?" asked Victor. "Lucien is the biggest problem, Mr. Victor," Herodotus answered instantly. He was writing a symphony. A beginner." The noise was so horrible that all of us left the practice room in the end. Rejoicing in secret, Lucien almost couldn't hold his smile back anymore. He had to thank Herodotus for letting Mr. Victor know what he was doing. "Is that true, Lucien? Victor looked at Lucien with great surprise. You're composing a symphony? Slightly raising one of his silver eyebrows, Ryan was looking at Lucien with great interest. Lucien nodded seriously. What I saw today and what I've experienced before brought me some inspiration, so I wanted to write it down. Gentle and kind as Victor, he didn't immediately scold Lucien for being too arrogant. Instead, he asked his student, "Can I have a look at it?" "Me, too," Ryan cut in with great curiosity. "If you don't mind, Lucien." "No problem." Lucien handed Victor the whole stack of paper. When Ryan was reading Lucien's work, his thin lips closed tightly as if he was going to burst into laughter at any time. While Victor looked pretty serious. "Lucien," Victor gave the drafts back to him, "I know you're doing this for me and I appreciate your effort. But Lucien, writing a symphony requires much more solid knowledge foundation than you thought. As a beginner, I suggest you start from the most basic theories for at least a few years before you actually write anything." Victor was gratified to see his student was trying to help him, at least the intention was good. Furthermore, the rest of the students just realized why Lucien did all of these. They suddenly felt Lucien was even more crafty and sophisticated than they thought. "Well, although your work is still very, say, immature, there are a few highlights in it." Ryan was trying to comfort Lucien. "For example, this part." The exactly few bars that Ryan was pointing at came from Symphony Number 5. "Thank you, Mr. Ryan." Lucien nodded to him with appreciation. Then he turned to Victor. "Mr. Victor, I know you do not agree with what I'm doing, but I still want to finish it. No matter if it turns out to be good or bad, or even horrible, it is the first piece of music work in my life." Similar situations had happened more than once before. Victor knew how stubborn Lucien could be, and at the same time, Victor was very tired with his own concert stuff. Finally, he made a compromise. "Don't let it affect your daily practice." After having Victor's permission, Lucien started working on his composing task almost every day. Adding more and more parts of Symphony Number 5 into his work, Lucien's gradual progress was hidden in the disturbing noise. In these days, Lot, Felicia and Herodotus were avoiding him as much as possible, while Mr. Victor was trapped in his office working on his last symphony. No one paid attention to Lucien. By the last week before the concert, after countless times of practice, Lucien was able to completely play his version of Symphony Number 5, although it was not exactly the same as and was much easier than the original masterpiece. Chapter 51, The New Message. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Chris_Liu Editor, Vermilion. After pressing the last key, Lucien slowly removed his hands from the keyboard. A feeling of accomplishment rose in his mind. Through the 3 weeks of diligent practice, now Lucien could play the masterpiece relatively fluently with some simple skills. Of course, it was not perfect, but Lucien believed that Mr. Victor could easily tell its value. "Lucien. You." Felicia was standing beside the door with her hand on the doorknob, looking very confused but also surprised. "Felicia, sorry, I didn't notice you were here." Lucien stood up and pushed the piano stool under the keyboard. "What did you say?" "The song you played was quite impressive." "You've made great progress." Felicia looked away. She was not used to making compliments, especially to Lucien. "Thank you, Felicia." Grabbing his music sheets, Lucien walked to Felicia. "I gotta go now. It looks like a storm is coming." In the month of harvest, September, there was always a downpour every few days. The weather today was very muggy, and the sky was much darker than usual. "Yes. Sure. See you tomorrow, Lucien." Felicia was kind of distracted. When Lucien came downstairs, he saw Athie asking the servants to do cleaning there. Lucien walked toward him asked, "Mr. Athie, did you see Mr. Victor?" "I have something to tell him." "Mr. Victor just left for the cemetery. I'm afraid he might not be able to come back until late." Athie was always polite and serious. "Would you like to leave a message?" "It's alright. I'm not in a hurry." "Thank you, Athie." Lucien waved his hands. He could talk to Victor in person the next day. Tonight he had some magic experiments to carry out, which were his priority. In the last few weeks, Lucien managed to read the journal, Arcana, many times. With the help of the literature stored in his spirit library, his basic knowledge foundation grew more solid. Combining that with what he had learned about vibrational frequency, Lucien improved the spell home and oscillation and created 2 new apprentice-level spells. For most apprentices, the development of their spiritual power often was much faster than the accumulation of their knowledge. Lucien, on the other hand, was facing a totally opposite situation due to his background. His spiritual power was still insufficient for casting 10 apprentice spells consecutively at a time. In the early evening, on his way to Auntie Elisa's place, Lucien noticed that there was a new secret message on the wall. "We have news about the evil creatures. Tonight, 10 o'clock. The same place," said the secret message. Lucien kept walking as though he saw nothing. In his mind, he was guessing the intention of this message. He never attended the meeting after his first appearance, so it seemed they were using the information to lure him. Another reason that Lucien was this cautious was the raven he saw last time on his way back home from the apprentice meeting. When Lucien first encountered the raven, he didn't put any thought into it, since there were countless ravens in Alto. However, afterwards he recalled what he had read in the notes. Raven was the most common summoned pet. The more he thought about it, the more concerned he felt. Now Lucien couldn't help worrying that the message might be a trap. In case it would probably have been set by the raven's master. However, the attraction exerted by the information was irresistible. Lucien always yearned for the crying soul potion, which could reveal the power hidden in a developed body. He had been looking for the ingredients for quite a long time. Now, he already had the corpse mushroom and the brain tissue of the aquatic zombie, so Lucien wanted to get Revenant Dust and Moonlight Rose as soon as possible. Except for using the blood of a Revenant to summon another, Lucien couldn't come up with a second way to get any Revenant Dust in Alto, especially under the watch of the church. Chewing his bread, Lucien was thinking carefully, struggling between his feeling of insecurity and his desire. Finally, Lucien decided to accept the invitation. However, before going there, he needed to be prepared. Nighttime, in Lucien's lab. On the magic circle carved on the stone table, a cup-sized black container was being heated over the blue fire, in which a certain kind of thick red liquid was boiling. Lucien's face looked very serious. He was stirring the liquid in the container with a long ceramic stick. In his right hand, there was a test tube with some black liquid in it. Pouring it into the container, Lucien slowly mixed them up. Every drop of the black liquid brought a gauze of white mist. As if it was alive, the red liquid kept shrinking fiercely and became thicker and thicker, like gel. Lucien knew that a tiny mistake would cause a devastating explosion. He must keep concentrating. Mixing all the black liquid with the red one, Lucien pressed his right hand on the circle and used his spiritual power to change the way the circle worked. Many red thin lines emerged and covered the container. Meanwhile, Lucien started casting. A white beam of cold light showed up between his fingers and flashed into the container. Heat met cold, but the magic red lines prevented the gel from exploding, and it slowly became more stable. When the white mist around it slowly disappeared, only a small amount of flame-colored gel was left in the black container. Lucien carefully put the very thick gel into a glass tube and sealed it, which was the last step required to make the flame gel. Lucien found the making process in the witch's notes. According to her description, he guessed the flame gel should be as powerful as napalm. In order to improve its power, Lucien was about to add some nitroglycerin into the formula, but in the end he decided not to, because he didn't want to turn his new lab into a heap of ruins for being too hasty. In a box in the corner of his lab, there were 7 tubes, each of them containing different potions. 2 of them were flame gel, 2 other were storm, which was used for fast healing and boosting energy, and the last 3 were brown owl, which could accelerate the speed of spiritual power recovery. Lucien put all 7 glass tubes, along with the flame gel he had just made, into the small pockets of his black robe. They were made specially for safely carrying different potions and magic reagents. Then, he opened his own notes lying on the table, in which he wrote down the structures and the principles of the 2 new apprentice spells that he had created. Based on his knowledge of vibration and frequency and after hundreds of tests, Lucien improved the spell Home and Oscillation, and thus he had his own new spells, one called Bat Screaming and the other the Professor's Oscillating Hand. After closing the notebook, Lucien climbed back to the room and lay down on his bed to have a bit of rest. Lucien left his shack that night at 9:40. Chapter 52, Baron Laron. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. The night was hot and suffocating. A storm was coming. Lucien purposely chose a different way, approaching the abandoned house from beside the tall willow, which took him more than 10 minutes. Standing in the shadow, he did not approach the building immediately. Instead, he stayed there for a while and noticed there were 3 people dressed in black robes standing in front of the abandoned house. From their figures, Lucien could tell one was Smile and another one was Philosopher. However, Lucien could not recognize the third person. Thus, he did not lower his guard. Grabbing a black, weird-shaped magic reagent in his hand, he silently cast a spell. The thing in his hand started trembling faster and faster, and ultrasonic waves began to expand outwards in all directions. That was Bat Screaming, the first spell created by Lucien on his own. Lucien was inspired by bats using ultrasonic waves to detect objects, like a radar. By reading the witch's notes, Lucien became aware that many sorcerers and sorceresses would hide their magic aura, which was brought by their spiritual power, on purpose to avoid being found by their enemies. When Lucien was learning the apprentice spell called Magic Aura Detection, he realized that the apprentice-level detection spell would be ineffective when facing corresponding defensive spells of higher levels. Thus, Lucien combined Magic Aura Detection with his knowledge of ultrasonic wave and created Bat Screaming, which could even detect objects with no spiritual power or that release no magic aura. Of course, That screaming could also fail if a sorcerer or sorceress knew the spell in advance. They would still have other ways to avoid being found. Therefore, choosing proper spells was of great significance in a magic battle. The ultrasonic waves were like invisible water waves spreading around Lucian. When the waves hit something, they would reflect back to the black reagent in his hand. Lucian kept focusing on the spell and gradually pictured the surroundings, as if he was observing all around him carefully in broad daylight. The detection range has a radius of about 100 meters, and it is a three-dimensional detection. Lucian thought to himself, there's an owl on the tree. Yes, it's Toro. Well, there's a raven. The raven. Lucian recognized the raven that he encountered the other night. This time, Lucian felt the magic power in this pet, but he could tell the raven's master was very cautious as nothing weird happened since he met it the first time. Its master was only watching and waiting for something. I should come up with an infrared spell, then I would be able to see the inside of the buildings. A new idea hit Lucian's mind. The black thing Lucian was grabbing was a dried bat pituitary, and after some time it turned into a small pile of ashes and slipped through his fingers. For now, his spiritual power was not enough to cast the spell without using the additional component. Lucian was still hesitant since he could not make sure who the third person was. At this time, the person started talking in a relatively loud voice. Mr. Professor, I think you're here but you're still watching. I'm White Honey, Mr. Professor. It was my mentor who found the trace of the evil creature. He respects your profound knowledge and he hopes to meet you. A moment later, Lucian walked out of the shadow and approached the willow slowly. Nice to see you again, White Honey. Lucian nodded to her. It's my honor winning your mentor's respect, but at the same time, it seemed like your mentor doesn't trust me very much. Mr. Professor. White Honey looked very surprised. The raven. You know what I'm talking about. Lucian looked into the darkness. You found Ashley? White Honey looked in the same direction. It's impossible. White Honey wondered, it's nighttime, and the magic light of the raven has been hidden on purpose. How did he notice Ashley? She now felt that the mysterious Mr. Professor was even stranger. When Lucian looked in that direction, the raven on the branch started to fall to the ground as if it was suddenly struck by lightning. Fortunately, the raven spread its wings in time and swiftly flew away, disappearing in the dark sky. You'd better explain this, White Honey. Smile and Philosopher asked in great anger. White Honey lowered her head and apologized sincerely. I'm sorry that I didn't tell you about this. And I also brought some gifts to show my sincerity. My mentor. He just wanted to see Mr. Professor. If anything unexpected happened when Mr. Professor was hunting the evil creature, my mentor might be able to help as well through the raven. Ashley. Now Ashley just left. Smile and Philosopher were aware that in fact there was nothing they could do about what White Honey had done, since they did not know how powerful her mentor was. Well, hopefully it will be a lesson to you, White Honey. Smile cleared his throat a bit. In alto, what your mentor just did can easily put him in trouble. Many of us will take your mentor as a spy from the church. I hope he isn't, though. I'm terribly sorry, but I assure you he is not. Owl. White Honey apologized again. Lucian walked in front of them and asked in his pretended harsh voice, White Honey, now, can I know where the evil creature is? In the old house of Baron Laron, in the noble district. White Honey replied, no one in the last 3 generations of the house has successfully awakened the blessing, and thus the status of the house has been declining. Furthermore, there are just few servants still serving the family. The other day, when my mentor's raven flew over the old house, Ashley found it was a bit noisy down there. Out of curiosity, it flew down and found the people in the house were having a sex party. What? Owl sounded very surprised. In fact, it was more than just a sex party. My mentor believed that it was an evil ritual. When the people were crazily having sex in the chamber, Baron Laron was standing in an altar at the center of the place and seemed to be gathering some kind of unknown power. At that time, Ashley noticed the demon's smell in him. Philosopher was more sophisticated than Smile. He nodded with thoughts. I'm quite sure Baron Laron is not the only one. Many nobles who fail to awake the blessing or to get the holy water from the church turn to demons and other evil beings to seek power. Their titles are worth the risk. Unless a noble house violated one of the first 10 articles of the holy law, the hereditary land and title of the house could forever be passed on to the next generations. However, if no one of the house could awaken the blessing in a few generations, the house would start to decline. Other houses would gradually devour its land and leave the house with only an useless noble title. In the end, the house would disappear on its own and the nobles would become common folks. No one would remember the family's past glory. Lucian had his own guess about the party. He believed it was the heretical ritual of Argent Horn. After 2 months, Lucian believed that they started taking action again. Do you know how powerful the creature is? How can I get to the noble district? Lucian asked. The area the nobles lived was enclosed by the inner city wall. At this time, the city gates were already closed. City guards would only open the gates for the nobles who lived there. From the scale of the altar, My mentor speculated that it should be a low-rank demon of an ordinary knight level. But before the ritual is finished, the cast shadow of the demon should be only of a high-ranked knight squire level. White Honey explained. She did not think a powerful sorcerer with such profound knowledge like Mr. Professor would be in any danger when facing a cast shadow of a low-rank demon. White Honey didn't know how to find Owl, so she found me first. I happen to know a secret passage to the noble district, and so I came with them here tonight, hoping that I could be of some help. After all, Mr. Professor, your explanation and guidance helped me a lot. Philosopher lowered his head to show his respect. If you don't mind, Mr. Professor, I am more than willing to kill it for you. It's just a low-rank demon. There's no need for you to do this personally. Lucien was feeling concerned that the heresy might bring some unexpected trouble into the action, and having more helpers on his side was definitely a good thing. After thinking for a moment, Lucien nodded. Thank you, Philosopher. After this, you may ask me a question. Can I go with you, Professor? White Honey wanted to join them as well. Ashley was gone, and so she had to watch the mysterious sorcerer for her mentor instead. At the same time, Lucien viewed her as a hostage. Thus, he instantly said yes. Smile also asked to join. He had his own thoughts as well. He wanted to stay as close as possible to Professor. Then, he was also accepted. Guided by Philosopher, Lucien, White Honey and Smile headed toward the Nobel District. Chapter 53, The Professor's Oscillation Hand. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. It was very late in the hot and suffocating night, but even then there were several people wearing black robes quietly walking on the streets. Aside from them, only a few drunkards were loafing around aimlessly. However, Lucien and his companions did not lower their guard at all. They had to be very careful to avoid the night watchers of the church. Those church watchers were like hounds wandering at night, chasing after the scent of evil. The black gloves those watchers always wore were the shared nightmare of every sorcerer in Alto. After 10 minutes, Philosopher stopped and said to Lucien in a low voice, Mr. Professor, we're here. The passage is in the house. The house was sitting on the boundary of the Noble and Edern districts, looking pretty plain, even old, and was enclosed by a few dilapidated buildings. Each of them examined the house separately to make sure there was no magic trap in the building, while Lucien used bat screaming and secured the surroundings. Then they followed Philosopher and entered the house. From the thick spider web hanging down from the girder and brushing his forehead, Lucien could tell this place had been abandoned for a long time. Some beggars used to stay here overnight. But recently, all the beggars in Alto went missing, Philosopher said casually when he was walking. Neither Lucien nor White Honey replied. Only Smile asked out of surprise, all missing? What's possible for the beggars to do? Where could they have gone? I have no idea as well, Owl, answered Philosopher. Some said this had something to do with the evil creature. While Lucien and White Honey remained silent. When they came to one of the bedrooms, Philosopher started removing some old crates which were hiding a secret entrance behind them. Cold wind came from the passage, but the air smelled fresh. That meant it was being used pretty frequently. How does Philosopher know the secret passage? Is he one of the nobles? Lucien felt a bit confused. However, obviously, he could not ask that directly. When they all came into the secret passage, Philosopher prudently closed the entrance behind them. Lucien noticed many magic circles on the ceiling. Philosopher, Smile noticed them as well. What are these for? Don't worry about it. In case of emergency, the magic traps will be activated to destroy the passage. Philosopher answered with a smile. I like your prudence, Lucien commended in his pretended harsh voice. I agree. I'm feeling more assured now. White Honey smiled. Another 10 minutes later, Philosopher, Lucien, Owl and White Honey climbed out of the secret passage from a dark corner. Under the cover of the shadow of the tall trees, soon they came in front of Baron Laron's old 3-floor house. Beside the iron gate of the house stood a guard wearing a set of plain leather armor. Compared with the many guards on the other nobles' properties who were wearing silver chainmail, the single guard here was clearly showing the family's decline. Only one guard is here. We can go in there directly, Smile proposed. Leave this to me. Philosopher took a step forward. Leave this to an apprentice from the School of Astrology. I agree. Philosopher can handle this. Lucien nodded under his hood. Then let me help you, Philosopher. Smile came closer to Philosopher. Luke was yawning in front of the big iron gate, complaining about the Baron in his mind. Party, and party. Baron Laron doesn't even have enough money to pay us guards. 10 nars every month for standing here the whole night? Come on. The old Baron was paying my grandpa and dad 20 nars a month. A sudden owl hoot interrupted Luke's thought, since it sounded a bit weird. Go and catch your mice, you nasty thing, Luke swore. Luke couldn't see anything in the darkness. However, when he turned around, he suddenly saw a ghost in a black robe standing a few steps away from him. Before Luke opened his mouth to scream, he saw the ghost's face under the hood, except for the 2 eye holes. Its nose, mouth and ears were blurred together. The ghost slowly raised its head. It was looking at Luke through the 2 dark holes. in which there were countless stars. The stars were shining like a dream. Stars. Luke murmured. All of a sudden, he felt completely relaxed, as if he was facing the person who he trusted the most in the world. Philosopher clearly knew that Luke had been hypnotized. Walking closer to Luke, Philosopher whispered in his ear, "We are Baron Laron's guests. Open the gate and let us in. Be quiet. Don't let other people know." "Yes, sir." Luke slightly opened the gate following Philosopher's command. "Please, sir." Carefully, Philosopher, Lucian, Smile and White Honey went through the gate and headed toward the house. After they went in there, Luke did not close the gate. Instead, he turned around and started guarding the gate with great passion as if his chest was on fire. He did not know why, but he wanted to do more for the Mr. The house's wooden door of the house was tightly locked, and the heavy curtains were also tightly drawn. In the big hall, a number of naked or half-naked men and women were having intercourse. Men's gasps, women's groans, a sweet aroma and the smell of certain fluids were mixing together. The hall was warm, even hot. On the couches, carpets, and even on the long table, pairs of man and woman, woman and woman, were moaning during coitus. They were having sex as if they were totally crazy. Some women's dresses were rolled up around their waists, while some other women were completely naked, and men were humping them like beasts. Only one person in the licentious sex party was totally different. It was a middle-aged man in a silver robe. He did not join these people. Instead, he raised his hands up and closed his eyes, as if he was enjoying the moans and was listening to someone talking to him. His face looked extremely excited, lightened with ecstasy. Black mist gradually rose up from the crazy people and slowly gathered behind the middle-aged man. The man was standing in the center of the pattern of an argent horn drawn on the altar, from which many silver lines stretched out and enclosed the shadow. Then the shadow became darker and darker, mixing with the colors of pink and black. Gradually, it turned into a tall and big shadow with two horns on its head. "Are you ready for my power?" The shadow suddenly spoke. The middle-aged man, Baron Laron, answered in his lunatic tone, "The great master of Argent, the forever-lasting silence, I've given my soul to you. Please endow me with your power." Slowly the shadow approached him and started entering his body, bit by bit. Laron's face contorted. Obviously, merging was not a very pleasant process. However, the pain was suppressed by the ecstasy shining in his eyes. "No one can stop me now. No one can stop me from regaining the glory of my family anymore." Apart from the ecstasy, there were also tears in his eyes. Outside the house, Lucian and the other three apprentices did not intrude obtrusively. They first had to make sure there were no magic circles or traps around. Professor, it will take at least half an hour to eliminate all the magic traps here," Philosopher said to Lucian. "No, we can't." White Honey sounded nervous. "We're relatively late, and I can feel the demon already. We only have up to 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, the demon will arrive in its complete form. Then we will be too late. Going into the hall directly will also cost us lots of spiritual power as well to deal with the traps." Smile turned to Lucian. "Professor, you must have some more powerful spells that can eliminate all the magic traps at once." All the three apprentices were looking at the mysterious sorcerer. Similar thoughts came in their mind. Although they all knew that the sorcerer was very profound, none of them ever saw in person how powerful the mysterious professor was. "Is Mr. Professor real powerful sorcerer? How powerful can he be? Is he even stronger than White Honey's mentor?" Lucian knew clearly what they were thinking. He was prepared. Under their gaze, he answered with confidence, "No problem. Smile. I'll handle this." Lucian came close to the wall of the house and pressed both of his hands on it. Moving his lips silently, Lucian started casting the spell. Invisible waves spread out of Lucian's hand. The waves hit the wall instantly and were reflected back. The following waves thus became different. In Philosopher, Owl and White Honey's eyes, nothing happened. They exchanged worried glances with confusion but did not say anything. Suddenly, White Honey felt the earth was shaking. "Are you trembling?" Philosopher asked her at the same time. "Not me," she answered with surprise. "Look." Smile was pointing at the building. "Look." "The whole house is shaking." White Honey and Philosopher immediately looked in the direction of the house. The old three-story house was shaking forward and backward, and the movement was becoming fiercer and fiercer. They could hear the glasses were shattering. "Earthquake?" White Honey wondered. "No, it's the house itself," answered Owl. "Mr. Professor?" Philosopher looked at Lucian and was shocked. Lucian's hands were still pressed against the house's wall. His whole body was shaking along with the building. His lips were still moving. "The house is gonna collapse." White Honey took a step back. Philosopher could not believe his eyes. Even a third circle spell fireball could not completely destroy a whole building at once. "What is this spell? What is this?" Doro, the owl, was standing on Smile's shoulder, yelling. No one noticed when the raven caught up with them again. It almost fell down from the tree once more, because of the sudden shaking. "What's the circle of this spell?" the raven cried as well. Only Lucian knew it was just an apprentice spell. The professor's oscillation hand. The spell could detect the frequency of vibration of a building and created a resonance to destroy the construction. It worked the best with bridges. Chapter 54, Com Hunters. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Inside of the hall, Laron, wearing a silver robe, was standing in the center of the altar. His distorted face was full of excitement and ecstasy. He could feel it. He could feel the shadow entering his body. His blood was running and crying, gradually changing his body. 40 years of waiting and dreaming. Today he could finally start regaining the glory of his family. The mixed moans in his ears changed into the applauses and cheers on his knight title conferring ceremony. However, at this time, the whole house started shaking all of a sudden. Earthquake. Is this a punishment? Although Laron had changed his belief in order to chase the dark power, in his mind, he still respected and feared the God of Truth. However, now he was just one step away from the great success. He could not give up at this point. The ceiling of the hall started falling. Chunks of stone and wood fell on the ground, and some of them fell on Laron's head. Of course, he was afraid. The only hope he had was the dark power he was going to be endowed with soon. "Do not panic, Laron." The shadow spoke to him as if it could read his mind. "It will take another 6 to 7 minutes for you to fully merge with me. If the house collapses, you will die. Stop the ritual at once. You've got a small part of my power, which already rivals the top senior rank Knight Squire. We can complete it next time." The shadow spoke very fast. Within 10 seconds, the shadow's thought had all passed to Laron. Laron was very angry. He could not stand watching his great plan being interrupted in the final stage. "No, I'm not leaving," Laron shouted. "The house won't collapse. The earthquake won't last." The windows broke in the violent shake. The strong wind of the upcoming storm blew in the hall and instantly drove the sweet and dreamy fragrance away. The people who were crazy with their desire suddenly sobered up. "My God, earthquake! Run, run!" People were yelling. Some were wearing clothes in a hurry. Some were running towards the gate naked, while some were even trying to escape through the windows. The evil ritual took away their strength. They stumbled in panic and fear. One of the women slumped to the ground and was crawling towards the gate. The man who was having a pleasant time with her ran directly past the woman without a glance. Watching these people leaving, Laron knew his ritual had ended. The silver lines on the pattern disappeared with the shadow. With an angry shout, he stepped out of the altar and joined the panicky crowd. On his way running towards the exit, he hurriedly destroyed the magic traps one by one. Behind Laron, a man in black suit who was seemingly enjoying the sex party just now looked out of the window, with his face looking serious. In the shadow of the house, Philosopher, White Honey and Smile were standing there, looking at Professor with their mouths and eyes widely open. Taking back his hands, the mysterious professor said to the apprentices in a very calm tone, "They're leaving the house. Be prepared. Hunt the evil creature." "Why not just make the house collapse, Professor?" White Honey asked. "I prefer not to." Lucian stretched his hands a bit. "If the creature dies in the ruins, it'll be quite inconvenient for me to collect the blood. On the other hand, the sound of collapsing will alert the church. We don't want this big trouble." However, it was not the most important reason. Actually, Lucian do not have enough power to make the house collapse completely. Compared with a bridge of simpler structure, the structure of a house was more complicated, and its vibration frequency also varied. Lucian could only follow one of them. Therefore, destroying a bridge might be within Lucian's ability, but definitely not a house. The power-stunned Philosopher, Smile and White Honey. They never saw a sorcerer who could cast such a powerful spell without using any reagent. Now they had no doubt toward the mysterious and profound sorcerer, Mr. Professor. White Honey was the first one who come down among the three. With the help of a magic item, she started tracking the crowd. Evil light detected. 15 meters away from the nearest window. "We move 1 meter to the left to better release the spells," she calmly said. Philosopher quickly moved to the left and said to Smile, "Owl, cast Homan's Oscillation." Homan Oscillation was also a sonic attack magic, which used high decibel to hurt people. In the most serious case, it could even take a person's life. Other people nearby would get hurt in their eardrums and might black out. "Then you use Silence Wall, Philosopher," Smile also answered calmly, "to prevent the night watchers from noticing us." Merged with a low-rank demon shadow, senior rank Knight Squire level. 5 meters away, White Honey reported, "No acid and fire magic. I'll use arrow." 1 meter. "Get ready," she said. Within just a few seconds, the first round of the attack plan had been made. That was the first time Lucian saw how the well-trained apprentices fought. In order to get out of the house as soon as possible, Laron roughly pushed the guests in front of him away. In just a few seconds, Laron came to the window, hit the glass with his body and jumped out of the house. At this time, a loud blast struck his head, as if he was hit by a thunder. All of a sudden, his head started buzzing and he felt bad nausea and dizziness. Losing his balance, He almost fell on the ground with his head. Before Laron could see anything in the darkness clearly, a metal arrow directly shot in his right eye. His blood was darker than common people, with a special smell of sulfur. The great pain made him break out in a frightful yell, but his voice was blocked by silence wall. Laron finally realized the fact that he got attacked. However, it was too late. The second metal arrow flew directly into his throat. Laron struggled a bit and soon his body stopped moving. Lucien couldn't believe that killing this evil baron who had just merged with a demon was this easy. He was also very glad, since casting a spell silently cost him more power than usual, and his remaining spiritual power was only enough for using about 2 apprentice spells. Beside the baron, Laron lied several naked and half-naked women and men, all unconscious. The panicked crowd running toward other directions paid no attention to what just happened here. Using Mage Hand, Lucien and the other 3 apprentices started collecting the baron's blood. After putting 3 glass tubes of blood into his pockets, Lucien stood up and said to them, "Time to go." "Yes, sir." Philosopher, White Honey and Smile answered. When they were about to leave, all of a sudden a man jumped out of the house from the nearest window like a ghost and dashed toward Lucien with a sharp dagger in his hand, aiming at Lucien's heart. He was waiting in the house. Now he knew it was the best chance to kill this powerful sorcerer, and he only got this single chance. Chapter 55, Midnight Bang. Translator, Winnie the Pooh, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. The Black Shadow was even faster than Baron Laron, faster than what most people could see. If the men and women who were screaming and escaping had stopped at this time, the only thing they would see was a blurry shadow. Only a person who had awakened blessing in their blood could be this fast. The person was a genuine knight. Within 2 seconds, the dagger already came close to Lucien's back. None of them realized what was going on behind them but Lucien. He suddenly sensed the great danger when the dagger was only a few centimeters away from him. However, Lucien knew he was no rival to the attacker. Also, it was too late for him to cast any protection spell. Thus the only choice Lucien had was to fiercely leap forward as fast as he could. Although Lucien was smart enough to create his own spells, he was still of apprentice level, and a magic apprentice was not able to construct a spell structure using his or her spiritual power in one's soul, which was the premise of casting a spell instantly. Lucien was clearly aware that very likely he would still be badly injured, but as long as the attacker could not kill him in a single strike, Lucien would seize the chance to fight back with his Ice Revenger ring. Suddenly, when the dagger was almost at him, with a loud call from above, a light appeared and instantly covered Lucien's whole body, protecting him like a chainmail. It was the first circle spell, Mage Armor. The spell was cast by the raven, Ashley, which was standing on the branch. Ashley was the pet of the genuine sorcerer. It could not only see clearly during nighttime but also borrow its owner's power and cast some of the spells. The armor was totally beyond the Black Shadow's expectation, but the momentum of the dagger was so fierce that even the magic armor cannot fully stop it. In the blink of an eye, the transparent armor broke into many pieces, shining in the darkness. However, the shadow did hesitate for several seconds. It was already enough time for Lucien, and he knew it was his only chance. Lucien swiftly turned around and activated his ring. 3 rays of cold light were shining in his left hand. Lucien activated the second circle spell in the ring, Palmyra's Frost Blades. At this key moment, Lucien knew that the attack was the best form of defense. The ring also strengthened Lucien's willpower, or he would be totally stunned and lose the ability to fight back by the night power of the attacker. The 3 rays of white light were shining, and they targeted directly the attacker's throat, chest and the lower part of the body. Facing the frost blades, the attacker quickly covered his body with dark flames, which were full of the evil power of tyranny and destruction. Although he could have used the protecting power or shadow coming from blessing, he decided to be more careful. The guy in front of him just ruined his whole plan. Of course he wanted to kill him right on the spot, but he had to guarantee his own safety first. Wielding the dagger, he precisely shattered the 2 blades targeting his throat and chest. At the same time, he brought up his right leg and melted the blade with the dark fire. The pieces of the blade scattered and were shining like falling snow. After solving all the troubles, the knight turned the dagger in his hand around and continued chasing Lucien. He also noticed 2 black balls shooting out of the raven's beak. It was another first circle spell, Magic Missile. This time the first circle spell would not be a problem for him, since his whole body was still covered by the sinister fire. Now the only thing he wanted to do was to kill this sorcerer in front of him who just destroyed his plan. All of a sudden, the tiny pieces of ice from the frost blades turned the air around the knight freezing cold. For a couple of seconds, he was frozen still and the 2 magic bullets shot him directly in the body. That was the power of Palmyra's frost blades, not only blades, but also the coldness of ice and snow. A level 2 knight. Ashley screamed. Philosopher, White Honey and Smile finally found out something was going on behind them, and then they saw the attacker. Without too much thought, both Philosopher and White Honey activated their magic items immediately. Waves of light spread out around Philosopher. Within the radius of 10 meters, All the ordinary people quickly collapsed and fell asleep. First circle spell, sleep. A strong onset of tiredness hit the attacker's brain, but as a level 2 knight, the first circle spell was still not powerful enough to drag him into his dreamland. He shook his head and drove the drowsiness away with his willpower. But a powerful air blast followed and hit the knight right into his chest. With a big bang, the power threw him directly back into the house through the window behind him, with lots of broken glass scattering on the ground. First circle spell, Force Wave, carried by White Honey's magic robe. He's a level 2 knight. He won't die this easily. Ashley flew closer to Lucian. Mr. Professor, keep attacking please. When Lucian was about to take out his flame gel, the old house suddenly started shaking fiercely. The ceiling was dropping and walls collapsing. Within only a few seconds, the whole house finally came down and buried the knight under the ruins. Lucian's spell already damaged the structure of the old house before, and with the heavy hit of the knight, now the place was totally destroyed. Boom. Boom. The collapse of the house was extremely loud like an earthquake, and it was too late for Philosopher to block the huge noise. Instantly, all of them realized that they were in trouble. The night watchers would come soon. Now they did not have time to find and kill the night attacker. Without any hesitation, Ashley, the crow, turned into a cloud of shadow and enveloped White Honey. "See you next time, Mr. Professor," said the crow. And then it flew away quickly and disappeared in the sky. "We gotta go now as well, Mr. Professor." Philosopher and Smile made a slight bow and also ran into the darkness. In their mind, Mr. Professor was so powerful that there was no need for them to give him a hand in this case. It was taken for granted that Mr. Professor would have assorted ways to get out of here easily. However, actually, Lucian did not. There was no time for being hesitant now. Lucian knew. He quickly turned around to find the entrance of the secret passage through which they just came here. A burst of thunder just arrived. Raindrops fell from the sky in a crazy way. The long-awaited storm finally started. Under the ruins, small clusters of dark flame were raised one by one. Quickly they burned down the pieces of the broken ceiling and stones. Then a black figure scrambled to his feet in the rain. In the lightning, the man's face was revealed. He was Rosen Aaron, the head of Aaron's gang. Aaron stared at the direction where Lucian disappeared and thought to himself, he could not cast a spell instantly, which means currently he's still an apprentice. He is much weaker than I thought. For a few seconds, Aaron's mind was dominated by his anger, which almost made him try to catch up with Lucian and kill the guy. But soon Aaron calmed down, for now his priority was escaping from the coming night watchers. He needed to leave now as well. Lucian was running in the cold rain, feeling pain from the falling raindrops. Luckily the glass tubes and waterproof cloth worked pretty well. His magic reagents and potions were still fine in his robe. Lucian did not have any companion nor support. He was alone, running towards the secret passage. Luckily, Lucian saw the entrance was just over there, hidden by the trees, bushes and grass. However, what Lucian saw was not only the secret passage, but also a man in white suit, his wet red hair sticking to his forehead, and he was wearing a pair of black gloves. The man was a night watcher. In the lightning, they saw each other. Chapter 56, The Night Watcher. Translator, Crease_Lu Editor, Vermilion. The moment when Lucian saw the night watcher, he threw the tube of flame gel in his hand toward the guy without hesitation, then continued running toward the entrance of the secret passage. He had cast the spell in the Ice Revenger ring, so the flame gel was now his most powerful weapon. He was aware that bat screaming couldn't work well in such a stormy night. The only thing Lucian could blame now was his bad luck. The night watcher, wearing a pair of black gloves, was also very experienced in fighting with magic apprentices, sorcerers, as well as evil creatures at night. And the gloves he was wearing were also a decent magic item, enchanted with different demon-constraining spells. That was why there were not many night watchers from the church. Besides, every night watcher was by no means being unskilled. Some of them were high-level squires, some of them pastors, and some were even knights. The night watcher firmly caught the first tube of flame gel flying towards his face. Being controlled by the maker's spiritual power, the gel was supposed to explode instantly. However, grabbed by his hand in the black glove, the momentum of explosion was suddenly stopped, like a fuse on fire suddenly being extinguished by a bucket of water. In few seconds, the second tube of flame gel followed. Unexpectedly, this time, the tube did not target the night watcher directly, but hit the ground and exploded fiercely before the night watcher could react. The fire of the explosion also set fire to the tube of gel he was grabbing. Immediately, the night watcher's body was covered with raging flame. Since the comburant was gel, even the pouring rain couldn't put out the fire easily. Lucian had no time to check if his enemy was down. He quickly ran to the entrance. Before he entered the passage, a great pressure suddenly struck his mind. He couldn't help shaking. Thanks to the ring he was wearing, at least he could still stand. Lucian subconsciously looked back and instantly realized what was going on there. In the bright lightning, the night watcher was still chasing him, with the upper part of his body covered with fire, but it seemed the pain was not bothering him at all. However, his skin had turned into pieces of scarlet scales, protecting him from further burning. The Night Watcher was a dark knight with an awakened blessing, and his blessing was called Red Dragon. With the help of Ice Revenger, Lucian do not panic under the pressure from the Night Watcher. He was calculating the distance between them, 20 meters. 10. Then he threw his last tube of flame gel at the Night Watcher, who was only around 5 meters away from him. The great power of the blast spread fiercely and the waves separated them apart. While the Night Watcher took a step back, Lucian was directly thrown into the secret passage. Since there was a slope near the entrance, he kept rolling for quite a few meters in there. Lucian felt like he was struck by a huge hammer in his stomach and great dizziness took over his mind. A mouthful of blood just burst out. Lucian had to hurry, knowing that the Night Watcher would catch up with him in few seconds. However, he was also very confident, since he had a plan. When the Night Watcher was about to enter the passage, Lucian activated the magic traps set by Philosopher, which could instantly turn stones into piles of mud. In only a second, the entrance was blocked by the mix of stones and mud. The Night Watcher couldn't stop himself in time and ran directly into them. The last thing he saw was the sorcerer slightly making a bow, mocking him. "We'll wait and see, you wretch." The Night Watcher punched a mound of dirt with all the strength. While he was running, Lucian took out a tube of storm and unplugged it. He needed the potion for fast healing and energy boosting. At the same time, he triggered the magic traps one by one to destroy the tunnel. However, he did not trigger all of the traps to prevent the Night Watcher from tracking him by following the sound. With the potion's help, Lucian managed to get out of the passageway faster. Then he removed all the remaining potions and reagents from the pocket of his linen shirt, and burnt down his robe, since his robe had a special herbal scent which was used for hiding Lucian's own smell. Lucian did not want to leave the Night Watcher any chance to somehow find him. When he finished doing all of these, Lucian went back to his shack and stored safely all the tubes and reagents. After drying his shirt and pants, he finally collapsed into bed, exhausted at the end of the day. He did not realize how weak he was until his head hit the pillow. Storm boosted the energy for some time but also drained him completely. He was not very worried about the church, partly because of the bad weather, and more importantly, Lucian was pretty sure that the church would focus on investigating the dead Baron, Laron, since obviously, he was more related to the heresy, Argent Horn. Soon Lucian fell into sleep. The rain was still pelting down outside. In the early morning, the rain did not stop. Lucian was awakened by the different sounds coming from the people's work in the neighborhood. He felt sick, and his body was very heavy, so Lucian decided to skip his shift this morning. The library was never busy, and Pierre was there all the time. Later, Ivan was sent by his mom to see why Lucian do not show up for breakfast. Lucian made Ivan go to the library to ask for sick leave. Then Lucian went back to sleep and did not wake up again until noon. He felt much better, but still a bit sick. He had lunch with Auntie Elise's family and left for Victor's place. There were just 3 days left before the due time for Victor to submit his last piece of work for the concert. 10 in the morning. Victor's practice room. Victor was very distressed, feeling desperate with the new melody. Then he heard a knock at the door. It was Lot, Felicia and Herodotus, who were supposed to come in the afternoon. Why so early? Victor was surprised. Well, Mr. Victor. Lot was a bit hesitant. Mackenzie asked me to tell you that. Baron Othello wants you to go to the association as soon as possible. The princess is there today. Her Highness wants to see your work, Mr. Victor. Victor's face suddenly turned pale, but he could not speak a word. Then with a long sigh, he nodded. I will be there in half an hour. When Lucian arrived, Victor had already left his place. Mr. Athie, where did Mr. Victor go? Lucian asked. Mr. Victor's was summoned by the princess in the morning, answered Athie, looking rather worried. Her Highness wants to know about Mr. Victor's 3 pieces of work for the concert today. What? Lucian felt very regretful for being absent from work today. Mr. Victor left around 10:40. If you want to wait, Mr. Victor should be back soon, said Athie. Now it was 12:35 in the afternoon. No, I need to find him now. Thank you, Mr. Athie. Lucian grabbed his umbrella and dashed into the rain toward the association. Chapter 57, Take Fate by the Throat. Translator, Chris_Liu Editor, Vermilion. 11:20 in the morning, inside the director's office in the Musicians Association. You gotta pick one out now. These are all your good works from the past, said Othello with his eyebrows frowning. We've been waiting for you for about 20 minutes. I'm sorry, Mr. Othello. Can I have some more time? Victor's face had a deadly paleness. His dim eyes had been losing focus for a while, and the musical notes were not making sense at all to him. Wolf was there as well, sitting right across the desk with Director Othello. A contemptuous smile appeared on his face. Stop struggling, my friend. Just randomly pick one out. After all, They look pretty much the same to me. Mr. Othello still needs to have lunch with Her Highness later. Well. Othello took out his pocket watch. The lunch will be at 1 o'clock. I will give you another 10 minutes. If you still can't make a decision by then, I'm afraid the association might need to have someone else for the concert. Wolf just came back from Ratesa Palace. He should be able to handle this. Ratesa Palace was the royal concert hall of the Duchy of Orvaret. Wolf couldn't hold his excitement back. Victor, I'm sorry to see you struggling. But we, as the musicians in our association, we should regard the interest of our association as the top priority. What do you think? Victor did not say anything. After another 2 minutes, Victor fell back into the chair and pointed at a piece of paper. That one then. The 3 words took away all his strength, but he also felt a bit relaxed. Victor did not want to spend more time and effort pursuing the piece of work which he had been working on for 9 years. Maybe it's a good thing, Victor thought to himself. Good. Othello clapped his hands. I'm glad you finally made the decision. I have some medicines that may be helpful to your mental state, but they can have some side effects. Anyway, I got to take a little nap. You guys can leave now. After they left the office, Wolf threw a bitter glance at Victor. Enjoy your last chance playing in the Somme Hall. Don't let your wife down in heaven. You. Victor's face was a bit distorted with anger. Me? Wolf snorted. It is you who will disappoint your wife, not me. Then he quickly walked downstairs. Victor felt very sick and his head became dizzy. Lot, Felicia and Herodotus, who were waiting outside, quickly came close to their teacher. Are you alright? Felicia asked worriedly. I'm okay, just need some rest. We'll start practicing this afternoon, Victor answered in a weak voice. Lucien was running in the heavy rain. He had not fully recovered from his injury. Holding the umbrella, the wind was preventing him from running faster, but he had to. The earlier he could get to the association, the better his chances would be to give Mr. Victor the new piece of work before the princess saw the song list. Finally, he folded his umbrella under his arm, so he could run faster. He just wanted to try his best. He didn't want any regrets. It only took Lucien 6 minutes to get to the association from Victor's place, a quarter of the usual time. 12:41 in the afternoon. Lucien pushed open the gate, soaked wet, with water drops falling down from his face and the floor. Lucien. Elena approached him in a hurry from the counter. Are you alright? I'm fine, Elena. Where's Mr. Victor? Lucien asked without delay. Should be in his own office. I saw Felicia brought him lunch, answered Elena. Thanks. Leaving his umbrella at the gate, Lucien rushed upstairs. What is going on there? Elena wondered. It was Lot who opened the door, whose face looked pretty gloomy. Lot did not ask Lucien why he was there. He just nodded to Lucien. Lucien entered Victor's office. He saw Victor was sitting behind his desk, looking very absent-minded. The lunch tray was sitting in front of him, remaining untouched. Lucien Sorine was also there. Did Mr. Victor hand in the music list for the concert? Asked Lucien. Lot, Felicia and Herodotus just ignored him. Only Ryan nodded. Yes. The third one was from Mr. Victor's past work. Taking a deep breath, Lucien went directly to Victor and said to him aloud, Mr. Victor, I wrote a great piece of music. I hope you can give me a chance to listen to it. I'm sure my work can give you some inspiration. Can we change the list afterwards? Lucien was too urgent and nervous to select his words. He sounded too direct, almost stupid. What the hell are you talking about? Herodotus was shocked. Lot walked to Lucien and was about to pull Lucien away from Victor's desk. Hiding his face in his palms, Victor answered weakly, No, we can't. Director Othello went for lunch with Her Highness 10 minutes ago. The list has been sent already. We cannot change it now. Mr. Victor, it's raining heavily outside. Mr. Othello can still be on the way. We still got a chance. No, we don't. Victor murmured like being in a dream. He was not listening. Being pulled back by Lot, Lucien did not know what to say. The rest of the students had given up as well. Stop, Lucien. We tried. And that's it. It's too late. Mr. Othello must be in Ratesa Palace now. Even if he's not there yet, it is too late to write a new piece of symphony. We'd better just practice what we have now. It can still be a success. Lucien took a few steps back, feeling rather tired. Maybe it was the arrangement of God. Maybe it was God who prevented him from going to work in the association today. Anyway, it's not my concert, not my business. Lucien thought to himself, and became gloomy as well, like the rest of the people in the office. However, when Lucien was sitting on the couch, images of Mr. Victor teaching him, taking care of him, and encouraging him for the past several months suddenly hit Lucien's mind. He was reminded of the hard work Mr. Victor, the other students and he had to practice for the concert, and of his effortful running in the pouring rain. However, looking at these people in the room now, why their efforts couldn't bear fruits. Lucien did not want to end up like this. As long as there was still a slight of chance, He couldn't just give up like this and accept the result. As long as they were still there, there had to be something else they could do instead of just complaining. As long as he still had hope and faith, he should keep fighting until the last second. And this was not the last second yet. Taking a deep breath, Lucien looked around the office and walked to the piano. "What are you doing, Lucien?" Lot yelled at him. Lucien did not answer him. Sitting in front of the piano, Lucien laid both of his hands on the keyboard. Even Ryan was very surprised. He had no idea what kind of music Lucien, as a new music learner, would present. However, the first several notes shocked all the people in the office. The notes were more powerful than ever. Victor raised his head up and turned to look at the piano, looking confused. The following several bars of the symphony came like an overwhelming storm, fast, intense and fierce. They were like the misfortunes in life, one after another, like huge raging waves in the ocean, like the continuous call to the battlefield, and like countless enemies coming for you. There were some bars of relief, but they were followed by even more intense and desperate struggles. However, the fight of the warriors never stopped. No one ever gave up. They kept fighting. Sailors were fighting against the monster like waves on top of their ships. Soldiers were fighting against their enemies in the battlefield. People died in waves and arrows, in tears and blood, but there were more newcomers following. The students were shocked. Ryan stood up from the couch. Lucien kept playing with all his effort. Why give up? Why? They still had time. They could catch up with Baron Othello. If it failed, they could still persuade Princess Natasha with the charm of the symphony. Why give up? There was still a glimmer of hope. They couldn't just give up. The first chapter of the symphony grew more and more vehement. Lot and Felicia were shaking with both fear and excitement. Was it fate that made you give up? Or was it yourself? Was it fate that beat you? Or was it the difficulties and obstacles? The music was asking. The player was asking. Victor stood up straight. He felt the questioning. The question was addressed to him as well. Lucien's soul had just been entirely devoted to the music. More thoughts rose in everyone's mind. I want to have a peaceful life. I miss my family. But I somehow came to this world and lost everything. I saw people here burning a woman to death. I went through the sewers. I wanted to learn how to read and wanted a better life. But I was beaten by gangsters. I wanted to learn magic to protect myself. But being a sorcerer here in Alto meant I had to risk my life every day, wandering between light and darkness. Did I give up? Do I want to give up? No. I'll keep fighting against the so-called fate until the last second of my life. I can change the fate. I can change my life. Lucien almost had a heart attack. He just let all his emotion out. He wanted to speak out loud. Was it fate that made you lose hope? Or was it yourself? Was it fate that made you lower your head? Or was it yourself? Is it fate that decides your life? Or do you choose your own destiny? Me, Lucien, Siphon, will never give in to fate. I'll take fate by the throat and beat all the difficulties. I'll never stop moving forward. Victor stood up from his chair, both of his fists clenching tightly. P.S. The author, thank you to my friend, Cheese Cat. It was he who wrote the many questions towards fate in this chapter. He did a better work than I did. Many thanks. Chapter 58. This is Fate. Translator, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. It was the first time Lucien, a shy and rather introverted guy, expressed his emotions completely through music. Lucien's persistence and faith were on full display in his playing. Although Lucien was still a bit unskilled, it did not affect the audiences in the room. Felicia, Lot, Herodotus, Ryan and, of course, Victor, all felt what Lucien wanted to tell them, while they had different understandings. Felicia, as the only girl present, was holding her hands and twisting her fingers together. Her father did not inherit the family's title, so she almost gave up her music dream and married a random noble. She often doubted herself, asking herself if she could really make her dream come true, if her choice was right. Hearing Lucien's fully dedicated playing, all her worries came to her mind. Can I overcome all the difficulties and become a female musician? Will I be respected because of my own achievements and be able to choose my own love? She did not know. The music thrilled her. Lot and Herodotus also had their own pressure in the family, and their fates were doomed as well. They would not be able to inherit the titles. They could indulge themselves hopelessly in wine and women, or they could do something greater, such as becoming great musicians. Lot's hands were shaking. The music reminded him of his cousin, Mackenzie. Herodotus took a few steps back. He had always been weak among his family. Even Ryan was feeling something. His face, which was always serene, was now lightened with excitement. He was beating time with the music, feeling the long-lost intense emotion. Victor was the most excited one among them all. His hands were clenching. His face was slightly distorted, and his whole body was shaking. The music reminded him of so many things in the past. His first failed concert, the encouragement from his wife, his hard work and his successful second performance. He thought of the great grief when his wife passed away, and of all his effort and the hard time Wolf and Othello gave him. The music notes were like sharp arrows, going directly to his heart. Victor could tell the sense of insistence and stiffness in it. I failed so many times, and I recovered the same amount of times. Then, why give up this time? Winnie, is that you encouraging me? Lucien started feeling tired. He knew it was because of the injury he got, but he couldn't stop playing. As a musician, or just a music student for now, it was his responsibility to finish the whole work. I'll let Mr. Victor feel it, he thought to himself. His listeners could tell he was exhausted, feeling rather worried. Lucien's playing was like walking on a tightrope, but it did not stop. Lucien seized the chance to have a bit of rest through the relatively softer and slow rhythm in the end of the first movement. And then the intense part came back again, which was just like a long battle. The second movement was more soothing, like sunlight driving away dark clouds and the raging waves in the ocean calming down, like the soldiers going back to their campsite for a short rest during the break. The following third and fourth movements were interwoven with each other, and the tune became pressing and overwhelming again. The sunlight disappeared and the dark clouds came back again. The seemingly quiet ocean was secretly building even bigger waves. The soldiers picked up their weapons and headed toward the battlefield. The greatest and final battle was about to come. The feeling of anxiety, worry and fear gradually accumulated with the development of the music. Eventually the storm came, throwing a fishing boat up above the raging waves and, in the next second, fiercely dropping it down. Faced with the power of nature, the little boat seemed so helpless and weak. In the battlefield, the final round was about to decide the fate of the soldiers, who were fighting, killing or being killed, but they were still brave. The fishing boat did not give in to the roaring waves. The soldiers were beating back their enemies. In the last movement, the music became gentle again, which sounded a bit grieved, as if the soldiers were lamenting their dead comrades in the battlefield, as if the sailors were missing their families in the waves. There came the darkest hour before the dawn. The listeners felt nervous again. What was waiting for them in the end? Failure or victory? Did they overcome the difficulties, or get completely defeated by the difficulties? Did they finally take fate by the throat, or did they give in to fate? Suddenly, the exciting and splendid chapter arrived and directly struck the listeners' hearts. That was a chapter of great victory. Feeling excited and encouraged, Victor could not stop himself from raising his arm. He wanted to cheer for the sunlight driving away the dark clouds, for the sailors surviving on the fishing ship, for the soldiers successfully protecting their land. The rest of the listeners were feeling gratified and excited as well, as if they got the faith and power for themselves to fight against their own sufferings. Ryan, who always looked calmer than others, was also smiling. Lucien moved his hands from the keyboard and wanted to stand up, but found himself so weak. The playing consumed all his strength and energy. This is, murmured Victor, as if he was asking Lucien, or asking himself. Ryan, Lot, Felicia and Herodotus all looked at Lucien, waiting for his answer. This is fate. Lucien tried hard to stand up, and replied him. Ryan was the first one applauding, then followed by the rest of the students. Victor also joined them, applauding hard. This is music, genuine music. Victor walked close to Lucien and commented. Lucien smiled, and he said sincerely, "Thank you, Mr. Victor. Since you like my composition, I wonder if I could have the honor of having you revise it for me. We can tell Mr. Othello and Her Highness that we want to alter the list. I'm sure they would agree and you will find it a good piece of work for your concert, Mr. Victor." Lucien's intention was clear to everyone in the room. He wanted to give his work to Victor and he was willing to give up the honor and fame he deserved. They turned their eyes on Victor, waiting excitedly for his response. A mixture of emotions spread over Victor's face: ecstasy, relief, excitement, greed, hesitation. An inner struggle was going on in his mind. You can put my name on the second position, if you want. I cannot refine it, and your work will be really important, Mr. Victor. Lucien tried to make his teacher feel less guilty for taking his student's work. After a while, with a long sigh, a smile appeared on Victor's face and he turned to Lucien. No, I won't. It is yours. This is your great work. I already can see your name being registered in the history of music. Apart from God and Winnie, who are supporting me, I still have my moral creed. That's what Winnie appreciated most. This was Mr. Victor, his music teacher. Lucien could feel the tears in his own eyes. Chapter 59, Confirmation. Translator, Crease_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Mr. Victor. Lot and Herodotus couldn't believe that their teacher refused to accept this precious gift. Although there were still some problems with Lucien's playing, this was still a great piece of work. If Victor was willing to revise it and recompose it into a symphony, it could possibly become one of the greatest works in the music history, the most brilliant gem on the crown of symphony. Even Felicia felt that what Mr. Victor just said was unbelievable. Waving his right hand, Victor stopped them and turned to Lucien again. Mr. Victor. Lucien realized that he couldn't persuade his teacher unless he cast a spell on him. He did not know what to say. Thank you, Lucien. Thanks God. Holding his hand over his heart, Victor smiled. It is the most touching music I've ever heard. Thank you. Now I have a new understanding toward music. And Can I have the honor to present this great piece of work on the concert as conductor? Thank you for your comment, Mr. Victor. Wait, conductor? Lucien was very surprised. I don't get it. It's your concert. Did anyone say that I cannot be a conductor on my own concert? Victor grinned. Idiot. Felicia commented in a very low voice, Mr. Victor is going to introduce your work to all the distinguished audiences on his concert. She envied Lucien for having such a great chance of gaining much fame within a short period of time. However, she also admitted that Lucien's talent did deserve this chance. After hearing Felicia's words, Lucien hurriedly said to Victor, "It is my great pleasure. I have a question for you, Lucien." Herodotus asked him from a distance, with his hands holding tightly, "Does the work really come from you? Yes or no?" The rest of the people in the room just now realized that Lucien was only a very inexperienced music student. How did he manage to compose such an exciting, brilliant solo? Was he really a genius, a hidden gem? Everyone was looking at Lucien. Lucien did not know how to explain to them, and he also couldn't. With regard to being righteous and honest, he was no way close to his music teacher. Now, there was only one thing Lucien could do, stick to his plan. "Yes," answered Lucien. "The inspiration of the solo came to my mind a long time ago. At that time, I had not received any formal music education before I met Mr. Victor. I had no idea how to write down the pieces of tunes in my head." Victor looked at Lucien and nodded. "The inspiration came from my daily life, from poverty, desperation and struggle. Every time I saw other people dressing decently, or having fancy dishes, I wonder why that was not my life. I want to fight for my own future." "That's why you came to look for Mr. Victor?" asked Ryan. "That's right. But becoming Mr. Victor's music student was something out of my expectation. I never thought I could be so lucky. After all, I started from learning how to read, not music." Lucien answered, "Although I met lots of difficulties in the past several months, I'm really grateful for all the support and encouragement you gave me, Mr. Victor." Lucien's real experiences and lies mixed together, which made his words sound more persuasive. "I've been working on this for more than 3 weeks, and I was trying to make lots of improvement during these days." Lot, Felicia and Herodotus are my witnesses. Ryan and Victor turned to look at the rest of the students, wondering why they never found the value of Lucien's work. "Well." Felicia looked at Lucien with a mixed feeling. "Probably it was our prejudice that made us deaf. Actually, I can recall some of the pieces that I heard while Lucien was composing and practicing. At that time, Lucien was still working on it, and his playing was pretty awful. So we did not really pay attention to it. Only Lucien himself knew that his awful playing was made on purpose." As Felicia said, "Our prejudice deafened us." Lot admitted, "Lucien, you are a genius. A great song like this usually takes months or even years of hard work." Lot was very impressed with Lucien's playing. If his work had not been this good, maybe he would still feel a bit jealousy and angry. But now he saw the huge gap between himself and Lucien. He was well aware of the fact that being mean and hostile towards a possible great musician in the future couldn't bring him any benefit. "Thank you, Lot. But I am not a genius. It also took me many years." Lucien tried to explain. "It's okay to just accept praise from others, Lucien." Victor smiled. "I've never heard anything similar to this before. I believe it's your own work." Ryan also nodded. "I've been traveling in many countries. It's also my first time hearing it. I believe it is your tough life which gives you the inspiration. Suffering made you a genius. Thank you for bringing this to us, Lucien." Lucien's face blushed. While other people thought he was just being shy, Lucien knew that he was feeling embarrassed and ashamed. "I agree with Ryan. Sometimes, without the many boundaries and limits in mind, a new learner might be able to better release his or her feelings and inspiration and create great works. Flying free in the world of music." Victor took over the words from Ryan. "I've been working on my 4th symphony for 9 years in memory of my wife, Winnie, but I was having a hard time since I was constrained by my past experience and what I learned from my teachers. I thought a symphony was not suitable for expressing personal emotions, but serious religious theme instead. Thank you, Lucien, you provided me with a new insight of my work." Then Victor turned around and clapped his hands with satisfaction. "All right, Lucien, carefully write your work down and I will revamp it for you and turn it into a symphony. I will also talk to Mr. Othello to change the list. Then we need to do a lot of practice for the coming concert." Chapter 60, Lucien in Suit. Translator, Chris_Liu Editor, Vermilion. Although this was not his original plan, Lucien nodded. "No problem, Mr. Victor. As long as no one would suspect him of being involved with sorcery or heresy stuff, Lucien do not really care if some people would accuse him of plagiarizing." In many of the religious books in the library, music was compared to a treasure that God gave to people, the most powerful weapon that people had in fighting against all the difficulties. Thus, music was always regarded as a symbol of light and hope, having nothing to do with darkness and evil. Besides, From the books he read and the conversations among Lot, Felicia and Herodotus, Lucian noticed the barrier between the church and the nobles. Although the nobles still revered God, the idea that religion and government should work separately started emerging in Aalto, the city where the church dominated almost everything. Therefore, Lucian was pretty sure that the church would not easily suspect a new musician from the association, which had a close relationship with both the nobles and the church. Lucian's only concern was that he might need to go through security inspection in the future, when being invited to attend concerts or evening parties. However, Lucian believed that if he could be relatively famous, there would be rare or even no security inspection toward him. Ryan took up a pile of paper and a quill from the desk and handed them to Lucian. Lucian grabbed the quill. Before he had the chance to write anything down, he suddenly sneezed. His hair was still wet, and several drops of water fell onto the paper. Victor just noticed that Lucian's clothes were still wet. You didn't bring an umbrella? Felicia's face slightly blushed, since she could see Lucian's fit body underneath his wet shirt. I did, but the rain was too heavy. I ran all the way, answered Lucian. Victor was moved. Let's find you some dry clothes first, Lucian. I got several suits here. Some of them should fit you well. I can do part of the work for you first, urged Ryan. He took away the quill in Lucian's hand. Go and change your clothes. At that moment, Ryan's fingers touched Lucian's hand. Lucian surprisingly noticed that Ryan's hand was even colder than his. In the changing room, Lucian dried his hair and put on Victor's white shirt, black coat, pants and leather shoes. By then he looked brand new, black hair, black eyes. In the mirror stood a good-looking young man. Look at you, Lucian. You look really good in this suit. Victor nodded with satisfaction. Seeing Lucian in this decent suit, Felicia, Lot and Herodotus felt somehow Lucian looked more reliable now. Judging a person by one's appearance did not only happen on Earth. Lucian, come and check if this part Mr. Ryan just wrote down is correct, asked Victor. When Lucian passed Lot, the latter said to him in a low voice with his standard, polite smile, hope we can exchange our ideas more often in the future. Sure, replied Lucian politely as well. Hearing their conversation, Felicia bit her lips with her white teeth a bit and made a tough decision. Lucian, you have my apology. I am sorry that I was being really mean to you because of my prejudice. I hope we can get along well and help each other in the future. Her face blushed again. Only Herodotus was still standing on the other side, his head lowered and his eyes staring at the feet, without saying anything. Not a problem, Felicia. Lucian nodded and then walked toward Ryan and Victor. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Felicia saw that Baron Othello's coach stopped in front of the association building. Victor looked very pleasant. Great work, everyone. We are such an efficient group, aren't we? The excitement I felt from the music is still lingering upon my mind. Although the rewriting hasn't been finished yet, the rest of the work is pretty detailed. I feel like it's ready to be registered with the association now, and I don't think changing the list will be a problem either. Lucian knew that his playing just now was still not very skilled, and thus he believed that it was his emotions infused in his playing that moved his listeners. Following Victor, Lucian came to one of the rooms on the third floor, where an elder gentleman wearing glasses was sitting there. You got your work done, Victor? Asked the elder man. Joseph, not me, it's my student, Lucian. We want to get his great work registered, Victor answered and then introduced him to Lucian. This is Mr. Joseph, a very experienced senior music critic. Mr. Joseph knows most of the music works in the world, including those of other non-human species like elf's music. At the same time, Mr. Joseph is also a pastor in training. He can tell if you are plagiarizing or it's really your own work. After that, Mr. Joseph will register your work with a time mark using his pastor power. Any work that comes afterwards which is similar to your work will be regarded as plagiarism. How long have you been learning music? After Victor, adjusting his glasses, Joseph asked. A pretty promising young lad. Well, about 3 months. Lucian felt a bit embarrassed. You must be kidding me. Joseph's eyes were full of surprise. 3 months? Take a look at it first, please. Victor did not say anything else, but stood there with a smile on his face. Alright, let's see, what are we looking at here? Joseph felt like it was somewhat a joke. Soon the smile on Joseph's face was replaced by a serious look. His left hand was beating time when he was humming the music notes, as if he entered into a whole new world, or a fascinating story. About 10 minutes later, with a long sigh, Joseph told Victor with excitement, what a great work. It reminds me of the years when I was helping the knights fighting against the evil creatures in the dark mountain range. Oh, those years, with courage, with faith and with hope. I told you, Joseph. Victor looked proud. I still cannot believe it. You said it's your student's work. From this young lad? Joseph's glasses were slanted on his nose. Lucian's a young lad who knows about tough life, said Victor. Then he shared some of Lucian's stories with Joseph. Well, I guess our association's gonna have another gifted musician then. Joseph was very impressed, but still found it unbelievable. He turned around and said to Lucien, if you want to further prove yourself, keep working on new music themes. About every 2 years, you gotta have something new to prove yourself. In 2 years, I would have left Aldo already, Lucien thought to himself, while watching Joseph leaving a time mark with his pastor power on the music sheets. Does your work have a name? It's sort of a trend now. Joseph raised his head. Fate. After Victor and Lucien finished the registration, they came to the director's office. Before entering the office, Victor suddenly smiled. I can't wait to see Mr. Othello's reaction to this. Lucien realized that it had been a couple of months since he last saw this bright smile on Victor's face.